Welcome back to the 2017 Hearthstone Collegiate Championship. This is it, the very grand finals, Brian. Over 800 teams initially, and we are down to 8. Sorry, 2.
2, yeah. We had 8 at the beginning of the weekend, and it is down to just 2, Poly Montreal and Rutgers.
Yeah, I have to say, if you've been watching this tournament from the very beginning yesterday, Rutgers definitely not a surprise to be at this point. I want to point out a statistic. In the last 11 matches, their game score is 10-1.
That is brutal.
It's disgusting. It's such a good team. Poly Montreal, however, fighting through the bracket as well to make it to this point. So 2 great competitors. I've been extremely impressed with what I've seen from Poly Montreal, and obviously Rutgers putting on a clinic.
Yeah, Noblord in particular, kind of at the helm of the Rutgers team, a player with a lot of experience playing competitive Hearthstone, was a participant in the last call tournament last year, so no stranger to this kind of environment, though he hasn't really played in a big stage all that often.
Yeah, this is a big stage here in Santa Ana at the Esports Arena. Let's go ahead and take a look at how we got to this point. As you can see up on the screen, Poly Montreal coming in with style. They're a very unified team. I had the opportunity to talk to them just a bit ago. They explained to us that their process was absolutely by consensus to the point that no one's allowed to touch that mouse until a decision has been made by the group.
Yeah, one thing that I think is kind of interesting to note is just the success of French-Canadian players throughout competitive Hearthstone. Recently, we saw Doc Pone just take a spot at the World Championship recently, Sidonia, the American champion from last year, and now the gentleman from Poly Montreal here in the finals of the Collegiate Championship.
Yeah, I do want to give a shout out to Shawnee State, though. Guys with a lot of heart, expecting to see more from them in the future. They're actually looking at opening up their own Tespa chapter at Shawnee State, so if you're on that campus, I expect them to return to a hero's welcome. We see there Rutgers on the stage, and what can we say about Rutgers at this point that hasn't already been said? This is a team that they're winning, and they're winning in style. They're having a great time doing it. We've seen no nerves whatsoever, a very animated group.
Yeah, it's just awesome to see these guys play. Not only are they playing very well, but they're playing like very, very much enthusiastically. They clearly love the game. They're having a ton of fun here, and no surprise to see these guys make it all the way to the finals.
Yeah, UT San Antonio definitely put up a big fight. Loved some of the unique aspects of their deck. So, again, expecting to see more from them in the future. Very fun group of guys to talk to. But, yes, this is it. These two teams showing down for over their share of $160,000 in scholarship prize pooling.
Yeah, and that's quite a bit of cash. That these, well, not cash, scholarships, but
scholarship cash.
It becomes cash in some form.
Sure.
But a great opportunity for these players. Not only win that scholarship, but also put their names on the map as far as Hearthstone is concerned.
Right. And look, winning a championship is winning a championship. Being able to say I came to a championship from over 800 teams and we won. That was it. That's a huge achievement, especially for a lot of these young guys. All right, but let's go ahead and take a look at the format for the Hearthstone Collegiate Championship. Brian, why don't you break it down?
Yeah, so this is a format we've been kind of calling a game, set, match throughout the weekend. Doesn't have an official name yet, but the teams draft their decks, all 9 classes, and they assign 3 classes to each player, which will be going up against another one of the players. The goal is to win 2 out of the 3 sets of 3 games. So essentially best of 3 of best of 3s. And if you do win 2 of those sets, you win. And in this case, you don't move on, you're the champion.
Yeah, and I do want to point out a little bit of a unique quirk as we get to the finals here. Up until this point, the first 2 games from Set 1 and Set 3 had been going on at the same time, so we didn't have the opportunity to see that match. For the finals, though, we will be seeing all of the matches from this, so, nice surprise.
You won't miss a moment of Hearthstone action here at the finals.
Wow, that was good. I would buy that. So, yeah, it's going to be a very exciting opportunity for these teams to kind of come out and show that they can deliver in the clutch. I got to be honest, talking to Poly Montreal, they understand the big task ahead of them.
Yeah, I mean, the task of defeating Rutgers, defeating Noblord's team, definitely a high hill to climb for any team at this point. And Montreal, they did say they were a little nervous going into this, but they have put up excellent results to get here so far as well.
Right. Poly Montreal has one final boss to beat, but let's take a look at how they got to this point, as well as Rutgers. We began on day 1 with Shawnee State taking on UC Berkeley. Shawnee State emerged victorious. Day 1 also saw Poly Montreal originally take on North Carolina, which they obviously emerged victorious. UT San Antonio took on Colorado State. UT San Antonio, the victor there. And UC Riverside versus Rutgers. This is where Rutgers first began this immense, just powerhouse performance. I want to point out, unfortunately, both California teams did not make it past day 1, so we were all forced to actually pick representatives, not based on where we live, but on actual merit. So, yeah, great performances from both of these teams to make it through. And when it comes right down to it, Poly Montreal deserves to be here, and as much as they might be a little bit nervous about this situation, they were saying they plan to play very calmly, collectively. They're not going to let the I guess, weight of the moment get to them.
And this can be a kind of moment that can be difficult to deal with, very stressful, playing not only on the big stage, but for such a immense stakes. And these are players who, they're not professional players. These are collegiate players. Some of them may have aspirations of being professional, or like Noblord, play semi-professionally already despite just being in college. But this can be a tough situation for these players to find themselves in.
I have to point out, coming into this, I'd heard Noblord's name, obviously, even casted some of his matches, but the fact that he's a college kid, it never actually hit me until now, like hanging out with him. He's a very upbeat, fun guy. Him and his friends are excited to be here. They want to win, and frankly, they expect to win, but they're not necessarily, sweating the details too much about this.
That's been one of the things that's been so great about this event in particular. We've seen a lot of these players who came together. Maybe they met at Hearthstone clubs or fireside gatherings at their school, and they're here as a team playing together and clearly having a lot of fun together. This has been a great event overall, both for the players as well as for the participant or the I'm trying to figure the word.
Let's say casters.
Yeah, me. It's great for me.
Great for Brian. Yeah, it has been a fun event overall. We've obviously had the opportunity to go down and talk to some of them, take pictures, mingle, and just talk Hearthstone, which at the end of the day is a bunch of fun to do. But let's go ahead and take a look at our first matchup here. Well, the only matchup, I guess. Poly Montreal versus Rutgers. We can see here the players lining up with their respective classes. Brian, why don't you walk us through?
Yeah, we see Poly Montreal with MCE, Frank Shadow, and Brio. The classes in order there. We see the Hunter, Priest, and Mage going to be going up against Ludicolo with Paladin, Rogue, and Warrior. Once again, these are sort of the matchups you see across from you. You're going to have to win best of 3 of each of these sets of 3 classes. And then we see Ludicolo, Noblord, and Orpheus, the Paladin, Rogue, Warrior, Warlock, Priest, Mage, and then Hunter, Shaman, Druid. And these teams actually redrafted the sort of sets that these classes will be played in just before the match here. So part of what was going on during that trivia period that you guys got to enjoy was the players actually sitting down and doing that draft portion to determine exactly how the matchups would go.
And as a note on that trivia portion, I do want to point out, if you saw Cora's name on the screen, that was in fact Cora, and she was leading all the way through, and I got to hear the very real howl of anguish as she was edged out at the last moment. So shout out to Cora. Obviously we bring on casters for merit.
Primarily due to their ability to answer Hearthstone trivia questions.
Yes, and that's why Cora is so great. So congratulations. But yeah, this format, new, different. It's very similar in some respects to the Hearthstone Global Games format, where you have to bring all 9 classes. But we definitely came in with a lot of questions. What kind of archetypes were we going to see? How are certain classes going to perform? And it's actually been a weekend of surprises. We came in. I really thought Warlock was going to be a little bit on the lower end, but we've actually seen Warlock have really positive results.
I think Warlock may be one of the winningest classes currently.
Yeah.
If I recall correctly, I think Warlock is 4-1 or 3-1. We may have not seen it on camera, but at least once. But definitely a class that doesn't have a ton of success necessarily on ladder or in traditional competitive play. But the metagame for this tournament is very different, because you are just as likely to play against, say, Warlock as you are against Warrior or Mage or Rogue. So you need to have very different decision-making in terms of how you design your lineups, design your decks, compared to a traditional tournament. Yeah,
and some of these classes are kind of reaching a point a couple weeks into Journey to Un'Goro where they feel a little more solved, or at least people have an understanding of what are the best archetypes, when it comes to Warrior, Rogue, I would say Hunter. They're all kind of reaching that point where obviously there's going to be some tinkering around to be done in the future, but they're reaching a point to where conventional wisdom is starting to shine through. Other classes, we've seen some great unexpected surprises, especially Priest, so very excited to see what Rutgers is able to do with that Priest. But our teams are arriving on the stage. As we see here, Poly Montreal coming in, representing that Canada pride.
The school flag even on his back, definitely looking to carry the school pride into this final.
Yeah, they did, before the match began, want us to shout out Poly Montreal and say hello to everyone. They are very proud to represent the school. As we see on the screen, it's Brio, MECE, and Frank Shadow, and computer engineering, computer engineering, computer engineering. Brian, what do you make of those majors?
I think the major meta is becoming solved.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing a definite bias in terms of the success of many of the more analytical majors. But we do have Rutgers coming on the stage right now.
We see them, the powerhouse players of this tournament. You would be disingenuous to say they are not the favorites in this matchup. Absolutely crushing people left and right, led by Noblord, supported by 2 close friends. And Noblord is looking for the win here. He will be backed up by Orpheus and Ludicolo. We talked about how the major meta might be a little bit solved here, but I want to point out human resource management is just that outlier one-off deck, just causing problems.
Yeah, not causing problems, solving problems. You've taken the interview questions, that were about your relation to the people.
Sure.
It was very valuable for the team chemistry, I think.
Yeah, it was very important that you had someone who was able to carefully answer the PR-oriented questions. So Orpheus, in his own right, as we've talked about, definitely considering exploring the space of being a competitive player a little bit more. But as we've kind of made mention over and over, these guys are having fun while they're doing what they do. So, and look at that beautiful crowd here in Santa Ana at the esports arena. We see them there cheering for their teams. I wonder who is most represented out there between Rutgers and Poly Montreal.
Yeah, you can't tell because everyone just seems to be excited to be on camera right now. But one thing you can see there is just how awesome the tavern here at the esports arena. The setup has just been amazing. There's you can't actually see that's just one floor. There's even the mezzanine level has setups to dual devs and play 8-player sit and go tournaments. So there's been people here all weekend who just have been having an absolute blast.
Yeah, having cast a fair few Hearthstone tournaments myself and seen numerous sets, this is by far, I would say, as a set goes, the closest realization to what I ever imagined the tavern to be. So hats off to the guys who actually made the set. It's absolutely beautiful, and people have been having a great time.
Yeah, there's even, you got little tavern bars serving Red Bull mocktails on the side. It's great.
Yeah, it's been a ton of fun, but enough talk about the set. It's time to talk more about this matchup now. As we see Rutgers coming in here, as I mentioned, 10-1. When they have been playing other teams, I have to point out, no disrespect intended to the other teams, but the other teams, while Rutgers is over there laughing, celebrating, putting their hands up in the air, the other teams are stone-faced. And it's very clear that they're intimidated, and perhaps rightfully so, but I wonder how Poly Montreal intends to kind of come in here and make sure they don't necessarily fall into that same space, because when you are worried about other things, you're not playing at your best, you're not playing optimally, there's a ton of room for error, and very curious to see how Poly Montreal chooses to deal with that as a team that is frankly nowhere near this level in terms of professional experience.
I mean, they have played calmly, coolly, and, dare I say, somewhat professionally themselves throughout this tournament. And, if you look at the decks that Poly Montreal brought overall, they have a pretty sort of standard approach to this format. They're playing primarily kind of solved versions of most of these various classes. The one deck that really stands out to me in their lineup is actually their handlock deck in Warlock. Most of the teams seem to bring the aggressive Warlock, the Zoo style Warlock, but Poly Montreal has had success with this handlock style deck. So the rest of their lineup is a little bit more conventional, I think. Whereas the Rutgers team, have the more sort of off the wall deck with the Singleton Priest, the Kazakus Priest deck, as well as a couple of other unusual choices with even Jade Druid, which is an archetype we haven't really seen a ton of, but in this metagame, maybe the right choice.
All right, we are going to open in game number 1 here with Hunter versus Paladin. We've discussed over the course of this weekend just how the Journey to Un'Goro meta has unfolded. Now, it's gone through a lot. There's been Hall of Fame, there's been set rotation, so meta really in a lot of ways brand new. Hunter and Paladin, both classes that are on the up and up, and Paladin being discussed as frankly being one of the tier 1 classes by a lot of the professional community. Yeah,
Paladin was one of sort of the bottom tier, generally considered, prior to the release of Journey to Un'Goro. But some of the powerful cards against them leaving, like Tunnel Trog Totem Golem, allows the more proactive versions of Paladin to actually get on the board quickly. One of the biggest additions has been the Rockpool Hunter, as well as Hydrologist, which you see in the opening hand here, giving the Paladin deck a way to support the Vilefin Inquisitor and the Murloc Tidecaller we see in the hand, to have just a powerful curve in the early game with that aggressive Murloc start.
Yeah, it definitely reminds me more of kind of the GVG Paladin, where you had that strong early game, shielded minibot, muster for dudes. It was a very good time to be Paladin because you could be proactive. And this is pretty much what this Paladin deck does, along with that strong curve into Tyrion, potentially Ragnaros, a Light Lord, and Spike Ridge Steed.
But speaking of classes that rely on strong curves, Hunter has gotten a massive boost from Journey to Un'Goro, in no small part due to the Jeweled Macaw we saw played on turn 1, as well as the Crackling Razor Maw that remains in Poly Montreal's hand that can adapt that early minion and make it much more threatening.
Yeah, Hunters have gotten some welcome tools, and it's become more dangerous than ever to leave a beast up on the board because of the introduction of Crackling Razor Maw, and it's forced a lot of players to change up the approach how you deal with Hunter. It's, can you really commit to every single turn trying to clear the beast off the board, assuming you even can, or do you kind of give them certain turns where you let them get that Crackling Razor Maw buff where it's maybe necessarily not as much of an issue?
It used to be that you really wanted to play around the threat of Houndmaster. You wanted to make sure there wasn't a beast in the bird in turn 4. Now, I got to kill this off on turn 2. That's not really quite as realistic. And now we see Rutgers kind of debating, okay, do we want to just play this Tidecaller here? Because we play the Tidecaller, and there is a Crackling Razor Maw. A ton of modes end up potentially really threatening your Tidecaller. Just +1/+1, it's dead, and you get nothing.
Yeah, poisonous, +3 attack. There's just so many different options there. So statistically, it's not that unlikely for your Tidecaller to die. And Tidecaller can certainly represent a lot of pressure, so important to protect that. Hydrologist, if it dies, obviously it's not what you want, but you did get something off of it in the form of that secret. We see they've actually chosen to go with Redemption.
Yeah, and this is a very interesting line of play from Rutgers here. It's very kind of counterintuitive to the natural play of you have a 1-drop, you have a 2-drop, you have a 3-drop. You play them in that order. It's sort of the natural way you might look at approaching this hand. But the threat of Crackling Razor Maw means that they want to make at least the +1/+1 mode not just a blowout. It's at least just a trade. Whereas a number of the other modes end up not really being all that impactful. Against the Tidecaller, they would just get totally overrun in that case.
And that's really where Rutgers has been the most impressive. They're not just looking to necessarily curve out in their matches or just represent the most power at any given time. They kind of mind game their opponents. They play to whatever they're expecting to run into as opposed to what's simply on the board. So, as I said, Rutgers coming in here very impressively.
Yeah, we've seen some really creative plays from Rutgers that, frankly, are the clearly the work of Noblord in terms of his level of play as a top competitive player. He's someone who I see lots of other top players tune into his stream on Twitch as he does game reviews of both his own games and other players' games, and tries to analyze what the crucial turns are, what the different options were, and he clearly thinks very deeply about the game, and it very much shows in what we've seen from him this weekend.
Yeah, when it comes to the decision-making shown by Rutgers, it's worth pointing out that they all pretty candidly said that before a play actually happens, Noblord basically is going to be the one to sign off on it. Noblord will suggest a play, and if the other players don't necessarily have any questions, they're going to go ahead and go along with it. So, to your point, it is clear that Noblord is definitely driving this team in terms of a lot of the creative flair in their approach to plays.
Which is to take nothing away from his teammates. Orpheus, actually, amusingly enough, I ran into on Legend Ladder the other day during the rehearsal. He was just in the other room while we were playing. But it's definitely a team where Noblord is clearly contributing very much so in terms of generating, especially these more unusual lines of play.
Yeah, and you have to imagine over the course of the season in the Tespa Collegiate Series, I would imagine that for Orpheus and Ludicolo, being able to play with Noblord this much has probably leveled up their skills as well, and no doubt they have contributed to Noblord, because when you think of how you get better as a Hearthstone player, a lot of times it's just learning to see situations from different angles, and regardless of your skill level, that's something you can bring when you're chatting to another person about Hearthstone.
Yeah, this particular spot, though, not really a ton of options available to Rutgers. The Coldlight Seer are going to only boost this Murloc up to 3 health. Still going to trade, but I think the reason they played this over, say, the Rockpool Hunter, just from mana purposes, they want to have the 2-cost minion rather than the 3-cost minion when it's unlikely they're going to get much value from the Battle Cry of the Seer.
Yeah, to that point, Rutgers right now in definitely a bit of an awkward situation. The Hunter certainly asserting itself. Eagle Hornbow, really powerful in this particular situation as it has the ability to clear 2 minions, and obviously we're looking at a battle that is at this point largely just being fought in the early stages to try to get board control.
And now Poly Montreal, they are looking to play on curve, or at least play as much on curve as they can. They have a bunch of expensive cards in their hand, and they're going to forsake the battle cry of the Razor Maw themselves to just get a minion in play.
Ooh, want to call out Sunkeeper Tarim there, coming into the hand of Rutgers. Sunkeeper Tarim is a legendary minion new to Journey to Angora, which has been making waves in Paladin and helps them deal with some of the board situations that otherwise might be a bit clunky, and includes a weighted taunt that is definitely what you want against aggro.
Are you sure it's actually legendary? Because my opponents always seem to just get it off Stonehill Defender. So
I mean,
they play at least 2 a game. Come on.
Stonehill Defender gets you a taunt, Brian. It never said it would get you a taunt that seems reasonable to deal with. Yeah, Sunkeeper Tarim, extremely powerful and might be a factor in this game, even if it just comes down as something with a taunt on the board.
Although, importantly, the Poly Montreal picks up a Deadly Shot. They actually have 2 copies of Deadly Shot in their deck, which gives them the ability to punch through larger taunt minions that might otherwise be difficult for a Hunter deck to deal with. So if, for instance, the Spikered Steed comes down on something, well, they at least deal with the front half of it. But this Tundra Rhino You look at the reaction from Nobbler there. He kind of, clearly unhappy because that is a big problem. Gonna try and set up this Finja, but that deadly shot, it can kill a stealth minion as well.
Yeah, I do want to point out that, the Rhino coming down, Poly Montreal really took their time on that because, yeah, on board, nothing can happen to it. But Tundra Rhino is such an important tool right now for what they have because the rest of their hand was not intuitive. It was deadly shot into nothing. Unfortunately, the Worm can't come down until turn 8. Unleash the Hounds, again, does nothing on an empty board. So Rat Pack a great draw, and they get the welcome news that Tundra Rhino is going to stick.
Yeah, it's a very, very powerful minion here, accelerating this Rat Pack, able to connect, and I expect we will see this deadly shot come down after to remove Finja, despite the stealth. A little bit of a nod, shake of the head coming from the Rutgers team as they realize this is kind of some trouble.
Yeah, it's Tundra Rhino sticking on the board just gives the Hunter so much ability to push pressure. It looks like we are going to potentially see that Sunkeeper Tarim, though, as realistically, the rest of Rutgers' plays are not very good. Right.
This is a handful of buffs, and Rutgers is playing a bit more of a proactive version of Paladin than we've seen in a lot of players' teams lineups. They have those Blessing of Kings and a lot lower curve with their Murlocs, so they kind of have the heavy end of a lot of what's going on in their deck in their hand right now, and that could make that giant Sandworm potentially have enough time to make an appearance.
Yeah, that could become a factor. For now, the Rat Pack was buffed, so not obviously what you want, but it's not a substantial buff, and it was enough to allow the true Silver Champion to take out that all-important Tundra Rhino. And yeah, this is the part where we've seen over the weekend Hunter begin to struggle against the Paladin. It's when these taunts come down. Sunkeeper Tarim, Spike Ridge Steed. The taunts are statted in such a way to where your minions are going to die trading into it, but it takes so many resources to clear. And Unleash the Hounds, I have to say, of all the cards I've seen in Hunter this past weekend, I think Unleash the Hounds has definitely not found that great giant board swing it wants.
And as potent as Cute Cat is, this is not the moment that it can truly shine.
If you were curious, I was just trying to keep talking so that Brian would lose track of the cat being on the board. But Razor Focus from the crafty veteran.
Yeah, not going to happen.
Yeah.
Not going to happen.
Oh, Cute Cat has been mentioned, so all's well.
Yes. And now here for Rutgers, they have the option. It looks like they're very likely going to try and Spike Ridge Steed up the Chum, perhaps, to generate more taunts. Or looks like maybe they're actually just going aggro.
I mean, you've seen a deadly shot already.
It's true, and they're potentially able to go wider on the board to make the deadly shot potentially less threatening. And yeah, the Rockpool Hunter boosting up the Chum. So now this is quite the wide board, and this is very difficult for the Poly Montreal Hunter deck to deal with. They have 2 copies of Deadly Shot, 1 is gone. Yeah. There is no copy of Hunter's Mark in their deck. So their only way to get through a giant taunt minion is either throwing a bunch of damage at it or that other copy of Deadly Shot.
Yeah, Poly Montreal at this point, kind of feeling probably a little bit bamboozled. They're like, what happened? We were pushing the aggression. Our Tundra Rhino stuck. Things were looking good. But yeah, Spike Ridge Steed, I would argue, one of the most powerful cards in this set. And people were, not necessarily giving it its respect in the point where everyone was previewing the card.
Yeah, Spike Ridge Steed was probably the card that personally I underrated the most. I thought that it was a little bit too expensive, and the problem is, that it's kind of expensive, but once it gets down, it's like, oh god, this is a disaster to try and fight through for basically any kind of deck, unless you have a silence.
Even if you just put it on just a hero-powered 1/1, I mean, it's still a very annoying thing to get through.
And even if they just kill it, you got a 2/6.
Yep. So we see here the cat being sacrificed. It looks like it's going to be Unleashing. Yeah, there is at least enough stuff on the board now to where Unleash is useful, but I mean, we say useful in what context? You're still giving up so many resources just to get through this buffed Sunkeeper Tarim. That is 2 spells, 2 cats, a Rat Pack. I mean, just throw all the small animals at Sunkeeper Tarim.
PETA!
Yeah. Unfortunately, many animals were harmed in the making of that trade.
Ooh, and now, there's a Spike Ridge Steed. Cold Light Seer could potentially further buff these Murlocs. And, with that that double Unleash, far fewer cards available to Poly Montreal in their hand. And it looks like, that now there's no real threat for Rutgers if they do go wide as well. Both Unleashes are gone. So they know, oh, well, maybe we can just play, Cold Light, buff these up if we really want to. But I would expect to see the Spike Ridge Steed come out just because they don't want to run the risk of maybe just taking a little bit of extra damage because they don't have a taunt and then dying to kill commands to the face.
Yeah, at this point, they're absolutely dictating the pace of the game, and I like Spike Ridge Steed here for the reasons you just listed. I mean, You just saw all that had to go in to clear through the buffed Sunkeeper Tarim. What could they realistically draw, since you know the deck list, that would actually make this a subpar play?
It's even worth noting that they attacked into one of the 3 rats, which left them with an 8 health taunt against 2 minions, which means that even a kill command can't get through the first half of the Stegodon seed. So, now Poly Montreal in a really rough spot. They have that giant sandworm that's kind of been mocking them in their hand for so long. May come down here, but going to be a little bit too slow. And it looks like there is 8-9. 1 damage off of lethal, including the Blessing of Kings for Rutgers in the following turn.
Yeah, and what has really impressed me so much about Rutgers is, when you're playing Hearthstone and you're trying to get better, you're learning the game, and you're climbing the ladder and all that sort of stuff, the way you evaluate the game has to be different. You can't just necessarily say, I'm playing what's in my hand that maxes out my mana, or I'm playing to keep a board clear all the time. It's the ability to read lines and think, okay, what messes me up? What's the line that allows me to win? And every single time, Rutgers has shown it, as we're going to see here. This is just going to be game for them.
Yeah, Truce of a Champion. Definitely that 1 damage they needed, and Rutgers going to take a commanding 1-0 lead in the series.
Yeah, I mean, this is now 11-1 in their last 12 games.
That's not bad.
Yeah, that's a pretty good. It's a pretty good win rate.
I think that didn't they lost? Yeah, they lost the first 2 games in their quarterfinal match.
That makes the statistics slightly less impressive, because then it would be like.
But the thing is, did they lose any other games throughout the rest of the day? I think that was 1 maybe in the
no. They lost
in the previous series.
They lost 2 to UC Riverside.
Okay.
And then today they lost 1 to UT San Antonio.
Mm-hmm.
But that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy to just come into a tournament and perform like that.
Yeah, 3 game losses across 2 best-of-9 matches.
Yeah,
that's
let's go ahead and take a look at the score, though, for this grand finals. We see here that is 1 win in set 1 for Ludicolo. So still needs to get 1 more game win in order to take the set. A reminder, you need to win 2 sets to win the entirety of the match. So Rutgers getting on the board early.
Yeah, and we're going to be jumping into set number 3, game number 1 here. So it's going to be either Rogue, Warrior, or Druid for Montreal, and then Hunter, Shaman, or Druid for Rutgers. So interestingly, we haven't seen a ton of success by Shaman throughout most of the weekend, though Rutgers is the one place we've actually seen the Shaman deck do exceptionally well.
Yeah, theirs is really the only Shaman coming in here that kind of has that finality, that climactic win condition off just basically going wide on the board and going for Bloodlust. And it's a unique approach. It isn't something they originally cooked up, but considering what everyone was bringing when they had to bring Shaman, everyone kind of settled on Elemental Shaman and said, okay, maybe there's some matches where we grind people out. You use the strength of the Elemental Chains to win out on Blaze Callers, Kalimos the Primal Lord, Fire Elemental, that kind of agenda. Rutgers just going with something different, saying, hey, this doesn't seem all that powerful, and their Shaman deck designed to just go wide in Bloodlust.
Yeah, it's basically a revamped Jade-style Shaman from Rutgers. Interestingly, Poly Montreal also playing a non-elemental Shaman deck. They're playing an aggro Shaman list. The 4-mana 7/7 still around, by the way. Hasn't rotated out. You
know who else is still around? This beautiful crowd in Santa Ana here at the Esports Arena. Crowd, we see you. When you put your hands up, we will, senpais will notice you.
Is that how it goes?
Yeah, that is how.
Your hand.
Live arena, a live crowd. So we see there the teams getting ready for game number 2, and again, Poly Montreal claimed they were not going to come in here and be shaken, but I have to feel like their best chance is getting. Okay, obviously their best chance is winning games, so don't necessarily want to say something that ridiculous, but getting a win early, getting some of that confidence back. I mean, they're coming up against a team that is just frankly snowballed. Snowballed. That's a World of Warcraft minion.
It is, yeah. There's Frigid Snowballed.
Yep.
It's also a Hearthstone minion. I mean, I think that the Montreal team is familiar with snowballs. We do see they're wearing those little puffy hats. It's got to be warm for those here in California.
But you gotta commit to the line. And to be fair, they're only wearing them when playing. But game 2 here is going to be a Druid Mirror. Now, we say Druid Mirror. It's both Druid, but these are very different Druid decks.
Very different Druid decks. The Poly Montreal list is, people have called the Egg Druid, even though there really aren't eggs in it. It does have Egg Napper, so they steal some eggs. But basically a go wide, buff my minions, Savage Roar style of Druid deck. While Rutgers is playing Jade Druid. Reports of his death have apparently been greatly exaggerated.
Yeah, really. Coming into this, since you had to bring 9 classes, it's been very interesting to me seeing how the teams choose to go, because Aggro Druid, while incredibly powerful in its own right, certainly suffers from the ability to draw really awkward, clunky hands that include buffs, Savage Roar, no early minions, no Innervate, and then you kind of just lose out over time because the deck is really designed to have that one concentrated burst with living mana as kind of the, okay, it's turn 5 or 6, let's hope this sticks after seeing AoE. Meanwhile, Jade Druid, how would you say Jade Druid has actually performed?
The Jade Druid deck from Rutgers has done well. They haven't lost much. So
yeah. Okay. Take Rutgers decks out of the equation.
Well, they did lose. This is actually, I believe, their one loss or one of their losses in one of the previous series where they fell to a Zoo deck with their Jade Druid, where they just didn't really find much to do early on and got really run over. This is a matchup where that can happen. The aggro Druid deck does have the ability to get out on the board quickly, though looking at the hand from Poly Montreal, they have a bunch of buffs, but really not many minions to put them on.
Yeah, I mean, it may end up being one of those situations, and it probably won't be because this seems like a really awful play where you just power the Wild, Mark of the Lotus, 2 minions.
Well, it's not going to be 2 minions. They're going to take this out. So Rutgers recognizing, unsurprisingly, that they want to keep the board from the opposing aggro Druid as clear as possible.
All right, so Finja. Now, Finja could come out right now, but the problem with playing Finja now is if there's no minion combat going on, Finja is actually incredibly weak. Now, once he trades into a minion and basically summons War Leader, Bluegill Murloc, suddenly it's a lot more powerful, but it definitely gives Rutgers room to kind of play around it.
It does, but at the same time, what is Rutgers going to do that can do something that doesn't put a minion into play? We actually see that their ramp card in their hand is Jade Blossom. If they Jade Blossom here, that puts a Jade into play. They do pick up a Wild Growth, though, and they're able to end up making a proactive move to advance their board without running afoul of this Finja.
I do want to point out, when we were talking to Rutgers prior to this particular match, I'd pointed out to them that in some of their matches, they had put themselves in positions to be rewarded by their deck, and the deck had rewarded them. So it's not as if I'm just saying they got lucky or something, but, I had pointed out they've gotten some pretty favorable draws at points, and I was like, how does this keep happening? And they said calmly, by design. So right there, they're like, well, Jade Blossom, we can't play that. We'll need that Wild Growth. And the deck's like, well, here you go.
I mean, frankly, to succeed in a large tournament, you have to be both good and things have to go your way in a number of spots, especially in a long tournament over many weeks, as we've seen here. Though, certainly the strength of your team, especially over long matches, best of 9, you have to be making the correct decisions more than just getting lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and as we've been kind of belaboring, some of the plays they've made have been very unconventional and extremely effective.
Yeah, I've been super impressed by some of the unusual creative lines that Rutgers has taken in this tournament. The Wrath here gives them ability to potentially dig a little bit and influence the board. They certainly are wary of putting any kind of minion into play that will just die to Finja, especially unbuffed. If they are able to play something, maybe a large minion that wouldn't die to the Finja straight up, they're just going to go ahead and do as much as they can to just whittle down this board, really respecting the threat of Mark of the Lotus and additional copies of Power of the Wild.
Have to know when, you can actually take that route. And yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. They're saying, if we don't leave minions on the board, what do you actually do to us?
And the patches draw from Montreal, it always feels bad to draw your patches, though this is a deck with only 2 other pirates, so much more likely to draw patches before you draw another pirate than in, say, Pirate Warrior. But they can potentially just play patches, Mark the Lotus, and go. And I think that's exactly what's happening here. Yeah, they're going to push this advantage while they have it. They don't want to give Rutgers the time to build up mana, build up resources, and really be able to fight back on this board. I'm curious to see if the Finja gets in here now at 5 health. No, they choose not to. And Nourish is a great draw for Rutgers here. Another thing they can do without running afoul of that Finja potentially filling the board.
Yeah, I just want to say I really do like that play from Poly Montreal here. I think at some point as the aggro Druid, you have to realize you have to start going. You have to start getting that aggression in. They choose to hold back Finja. Now, Finja could have died to, I believe it was just Wrath Hero Power, Swipe Hero Power, combination of Swipe, Wrath. So there were ways for Finja to die, but yeah, they kind of took like a halfway play on this one. They're like, well, we're going aggressive. We have some minions in our hand. One of them has charge now. We might as well just buff them and go. But they hold the Finja. Very interesting decision to me.
And one interesting thing in Rutgers' hand is that Yogg. They have Yogg-Saron, Hope's End, in their hand that if this board does get really out of control, thanks to perhaps Finja pulling additional Murlocs, can still get them back into this game. And I think they might be debating just nourishing for mana here to allow them to possibly actually cast the Yogg in future turns. I think that might be a little bit of the debate going on. Jade Idol looks good, but it runs into Finja, so they're not going to play it.
Yeah, it's pretty much them saying, no, just bring Finja out. It's going to be fine. Just hit with Finja.
Ooh, the Living Mana draw from Poly Montreal. It's interesting because Living Mana will give them, at this point, 4 2/2s, but will reduce their mana down to the point they cannot cast a Savage Roar the next turn. So that could potentially run afoul of removal from Rutgers, or just armor gain from Rutgers that can survive a turn of those minions, potentially ramping into that Yogg-Saron.
Yeah, it's an interesting turn, though, because, again, I want to point out, if they wait too long, and that too long is coming up really quickly because of the mana acceleration of the ramp druid here, that Jade Druid, they're just out of the game anyway. So at some point, you have to make a play that you feel is chancy or may not be optimal because you realize you just have to start going.
Right. Yeah, and the Finja, that they used so many resources to accelerate out. They used Coin Innervate to play Finja on turn 2. It's now turn 5. Finja has not yet attacked. It has constrained what Rutgers has been able to do with their turns, with their cards. But yeah, they're going to go ahead and Living Mana, and now Poly Montreal down to just 2 mana on their next turn, assuming nothing's killed. They still keep Finja back, and Fandral is a draw for Rutgers here. That could give them possibly Fandral plus Feral Rage. Not that Feral Rage actually matters that much. I actually wonder if they just want to cast a bunch of spells this turn to set up the Innervate into Yogg the following turn, because they are so far behind this board. I feel like they need to accelerate themselves out to that Yogg next turn, or else they're just not going to have the opportunity to come back.
Yeah, this game is definitely taking some very interesting directions in terms of what you'd expect from this matchup, which you expect the aggro druid to just play a few minions, buff them, start going face, but we've seen them hold the Finja. We've seen the Jade Druid just kind of sit back, not wanting to enable the Finja, but we do see minions are finally coming down.
And this is exactly what I expected to see from Rutgers this turn. They're going to cast 3 spells, which increases the spell count for Yogg-Saron next turn. They can even potentially, because they ramped with Jade Blossom, cast Jade Idol, then Innervate out the Yogg-Saron the following turn, which increases the spell count again. And I expect we'll actually just see Devolve into Lightning Storm off of the Yogg and completely destroy Poly
Well, I mean,
Montreal.
why not? I mean, I think it'll probably just Shadow Step itself.
Yeah, probably.
Yogg-Saron, since the change back in the day, certainly much less consistent. Obviously, if Yogg-Saron is silenced or transfigured or dies, stops casting spells. So Yogg is certainly a much more chancy proposition now, but it's an answer to set rotation, the new Journey to Ungoro expansion in Hall of Fame, changing up what the Druid had to work with in its toolkit.
And now Poly Montreal trying to figure out, okay, well, what do we do? What is the best way for us to maneuver going forward? They can't cast Savage Roar this turn. The Living Mana destroyed their mana crystals, so they are down to just 2 mana. They're going to trade in, I imagine, one of the Mana Treants. This will open up some of their mana for next turn, and they are pushing at least 10, perhaps 13 if they choose to attack with Finja.
Yeah, it's worth noting that if they had killed the Golem with Finja there, obviously full board, so nothing was going to be summoned. In case you were curious, like, oh, we've been waiting for Finja to attack. Why hasn't it happened?
And now I have to think that Rutgers may realize they are going to die if they don't play Yogg this turn. The threat of Savage Roar into lethal does mean we are seeing Innervate into Jade Idol and Yogg-Saron.
Rutgers assumes the Yogg-Saron position. Here we go.
That was one sad yawn.
That, I mean, the Yogg did things.
It did, but it didn't kill a single minion, not even itself. They have a Twin Emperor in their hand, though. If they can just get a Cthulhu. I think this may just be lethal damage here. There are secrets, so Montreal has to be trying to figure out what these secrets could be in terms of how these impact the game state. I believe we saw an eye for an eye and a snake trap.
Yep.
But Montreal, of course, doesn't know that. These are secrets that came off of the Yogg-Saron, so they could be anything. and they may be terrified that if they commit immediately with the Savage Roar and they get explosive trapped by that Hunter Secret.
Yeah.
At the same time, you can't play around everything at this kind of juncture. So Savage Roar it is, and I think they're gonna get the good news that there's nothing that's gonna stop them.
Oh, they're going to take a little bit of damage there from that eye for an eye, but yeah, they're going to just jam those Treants into the face, and Finja gets the last laugh.
he's been waiting from turn 3, and now it is this. No, he's not going to get a chance. He's remaining stealth the entire game.
Finja's a pacifist now. He's abandoned the ways of war.
He is committed to the ways of the ninja. He must remain in the
he's
in the
Finja the ninja. I want to say in that last sequence there, Poly Montreal was forced to, address the fact that you said could be an explosive trap, could just be game, and it was an unusual situation, which oftentimes if Yogg-Saron doesn't just sack itself, that's what you end up with is unusual board state. So it's important to take that kind of moment, just look through, figure out all the possible things that could go wrong, that could prevent you from winning, and they did that, and admittedly you didn't have to test for much, but I like them being patient there and not just ripping it.
Yeah, certainly. You need to figure out what can go wrong.
Yeah.
And Yogg-Saron's capable of making a lot of things go wrong, but fortunately for Poly Montreal, Yogg-Saron in fact ended the hopes of Rutgers in that game.
I was going to say he's named Hopes End, not Good Times Yogg. So let's go ahead and take a look at the score thus far in this series. That is 1 game win for Ludicolo in set 1 for Rutgers and 1 game in set 3 for Poly Montreal. So even game thus far. Reminder, you have to win 2 games in a set to take the set, and then you have to win 2 sets to win the match in what I've just started calling game set match, and I'm just going to force that to be a thing.
And I believe we'll be moving on to set number 2 next. So things are pretty even here. 1 game apiece in 1 set apiece for these 2 teams. So no one sort of on the back foot just yet. Yeah,
and I think that win is very important for Poly Montreal to get that win, get that confidence of, okay, look, these guys are really good, but they're mortal. It's a game of Hearthstone. If we sit down and we think and we try and we play to our outs, we can beat these guys and we can win the series.
Even old gods can bleed.
Even old gods can bleed. Yeah, and Noblord's obviously a pretty young god, but
it's true. But Yogg, he's old.
Well, he bleeds quite often. That's not a surprise. Yogg-Saron, very self-destructive individual. We're trying to talk him through his phase. Yeah. But we see here Frank Shadow going to be taking on Noblord. It's going to be Shaman, Paladin, Warlock versus Warlock, Priest, and Mage. And, as we see, they are taking on each other, but it's by committee, so they will have the support of their teammates.
It's a team game.
Yeah.
That's the sort of story of this event.
Yep.
These while we've talked a lot about a lot of the star players of these teams, it's very much a collaborative process, and we see lots of teams down at the floor of the tavern there. People definitely enjoying. Yep, there's a happy guy right there.
Right on time, definitely enjoying. I see a friend of mine checking her phone. Sam, what are you doing? But looking up at the team now, they are discussing how they're going to approach the next game, and it is going to be Paladin versus Warlock. So this Warlock, I believe, is Zoo.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is an interesting version of Zoo being played by the Rutgers squad. They have only 1 copy of Doomguard, 1 copy of Bittertide Hydra, 1 copy of Ravenous Pterodax. It's just the kind of mix and match Zoo they got going on here.
Yeah, I believe their Zoo is also the one that is more built towards Sea Giants.
Mm-hmm. So it is a double Sea Giant Zoo deck, looking to use cards like Firefly to get multiple minions out of an individual card. We see the Firefly in the hand right there.
All right, I want to point out really quickly the score you're seeing on the left, not reflective of the match or sets. This is just within the individual set for set number 2, so no games won just yet. Reminder, in order to win, you have to win 2 games in a set.
And this version of Paladin from Poly Montreal is kind of the go-to mid-range version we've seen quite a bit of throughout the weekend. And really, if you've been playing on ladder recently, you've probably seen quite a bit of it. The Murloc early game into the kind of control shell late game, but no early game really here for Poly Montreal.
Yeah, now way, way, way back in the day, I'm talking like vanilla Hearthstone, the olden days, Control Paladin used to get pretty handily shredded by Zoo. It was not a great situation. The Paladin didn't have much to do on the early turns, and the Zoo's obviously building sticky boards, especially once Curse of Naxxramas came out. You had access to Egg and other sticky minions. Wow, a little cheeky stuff there from Noblord. But nowadays, I would actually argue that Paladin definitely has an even stronger early game than the Zoo player.
Well, if you get the curve, the Paladin deck, it has a lot of powerful early turns. Vilefin Inquisitor, kind of late to the party, though. You want that card to come down in turn 1 so you can then coin out the War Leader to contest essentially anything your opponent can have on the board at that point. But now, Rutgers, they're going to recognize the threat of that Vilefin and the potential War Leader coming down. So I'd expect this to die on Rutgers' turn.
Yeah, you did point out, and I think it's worth highlighting, the strength of the Paladin early game a lot of times comes down to the Murloc synergy or getting Hydrologist, having a secret that can change the early strikes. Zoo, on the other hand, playing minions, and there's not necessarily a ton of synergies, at least in this current version of Zoo, in the early going. Yes, having minions on the board leads to Sea Giants later. Having weak minions allows your Pterodax to be buffed, but in the early going, their minion for minion count does seem pretty favorable.
And this is a very heads-up play from Polytechnique Montreal, recognizing that, okay, well, on board, they can kill our Inquisitors. So we want to coin out another Murloc, which means the War Leader in our hand can threaten to take out essentially anything that come down. And I think we're going to see Soulfire here, yeah. How often do you see a 1-drop just get Soulfired, and it you can't feel good about having to do that?
No, you can't feel good either about the fact that that is a Sea Giant now gone.
A little bit of a emote metagame evolving here.
Yeah, I mean, this is a friendly game, obviously, and these guys have been hanging out in the same room talking, but, this is it. This is the finals, and it's okay to get a little bit chippy when you're trying to win your share of $160,000 in prize pool scholarships.
And, the Polytechnique Montreal fellows have to be feeling pretty good here with this hand, given the board state. Only 2 small minions in play for Rutgers, and Stonehill Defender currently on board ends up eating both of them as the 1/4 taunting at the 2/2/1 bodies, and oh, look at that! It's a Tyrion.
Yeah, I was going to say it. Surprise, surprise, it's Tyrion off Stonehill Defender. I feel like I've seen this a lot lately. Stonehill Defender plays really well into Paladin specifically because of the ability to discover Tyrion Fordring.
Not even just Tyrion Fordring, though. There's Sunkeeper Tarim, there's Wicker Flame Burn Bristle, 3 powerful legendary minions with taunt. And because of the bias toward discovering class cards, you're very likely to see one of those in your Discover. And yeah, it is unsurprisingly Tyrion that Polytechnique Montreal does choose.
Yeah, meanwhile, on the board, we see here kind of an awkward situation for Rutgers. You don't want to sacrifice one of the minions to the Pterodax because you need to push through the Stonehill Defender to begin developing damage. So instead, we're going for the old double Knife Juggler. Please do not have Consecration. I need these to live.
The thing is, if you get Consecrated here, it's not that bad. Yes, your opponent kills both your minions, but they're spending all of their mana on their turn and developing nothing themselves. It does give them card advantage over you and clear your board, but you're playing Warlock. You have Life Tap, so you're not feeling too bad if that happens. Obviously, you'd much rather one of these get to stick. And one of them will, but it will be due to the True Silver Champion waiting in the wings to kill it the next turn.
I think you're making a lot of sense now. It's clearly a lot of logic, but I just know when I put 2 Knife Jugglers on the board, it's turn 3, Paladin's going into turn 4. There's just a primal fear, please let my Knife Jugglers live. Thankfully, 1 does survive, and we're going to see a pretty intuitive play here. The Flame Elemental into the Ravenous Pterodax, and this card, I gotta say, was an absolute terror yesterday, just eviscerating teams.
Yeah, and the first evolution, or rather adaptation, is +1/+1, getting it out of True Silver Champion range. Now this is an interesting decision. Wind Fury, +3 attack, and Divine Shield are all very powerful options here. The Wind Fury or Divine Shield are better choices against, say, an Aldor Peacekeeper. Divine Shield can save you against, say, Equality. Whereas Wind Fury, if you feel like you really need to go, you really need to get them, Wind Fury is the highest damage overall option available.
Yeah, I think in this particular situation with what we can see as casters, I like Crackling Shield. Best of all, really big fan of Divine Shield in this situation. But to your point, yeah, these are all just good choices.
Yeah, they will go with Lightning Speed, so I think Rutgers is feeling like they need to go. They need to be able to actually end this game. And oof, Aldor Peacekeeper picked up from Montreal, potentially able to neutralize most of the threat of that Pterodax.
Yeah, looking at these turn 5 plays here, Aldor Peacekeeper has to be feeling like a pretty juicy option here. Get that Peacekeeper down, largely mitigate the effects of the Pterodax.
It's pretty important to note that the threat of a big Wind Fury minion from Warlock, a lot less nowadays that Power Overwhelming is no longer available in Standard. So, you'll only see that do twice its actual power most of the time.
Yeah.
And if you can reduce that to 1, well, that's not too threatening.
Yeah, and I mean, he could just use Equality here to get rid of it, but that does leave him with a rather, is it an underwhelming turn? Because, you have to swing into it, and then you play the Burn Bristle potentially, but you're leaving the Knife Juggler up, so I think I like this.
Playing Wicker Flame into a Knife Juggler feels pretty bad because you're going to give your opponent the ability to potentially juggle off the shield and trade in. And Poly Montreal, decides they just want to neutralize this now with the Aldor. And this also plays into a possible Sunkeeper Terram the following turn, which is very threatening.
All right, we see Soulfire come into the hand off the tap. Looks like Rutgers is going to go ahead and just play down the Firefly for now. Sea Giant is getting very close to being a problem, but when you play it against Paladin, you're usually not assured that Sea Giant is actually going to accomplish that much.
Right. Yeah, Sea Giant, it runs into Aldor Peacekeeper, Equality, Sunkeeper Terram, even just an individual big Divine Shield taunt minion, or there's a Stegodon Steed. That is just a big taunt minion, potentially, that's even bigger in overall health than a possible Sea Giant.
I like that title better, Stegodon Steed, because it actually tells you realistically what's going on there.
I always just think of it that way. I wasn't even intentionally calling it something other than the card's name.
Not even trying to be brilliant, Brian, just doing it. Good job.
and now, Rutgers may have wished they used that Soulfire on their turn because they could have cleared off his body to prevent there being a target for a Spike Ridge Steed. They're, now in a spot where, okay, well, there's a 5/8 taunt that's going to leave behind yet another taunt. This has got to be getting pretty ugly for Rutgers now.
Yeah, having Bittertide Hydra in the deck, I will say, does allow them another big threat. And, if you chain together enough big threats, eventually you're thinking, okay, the Paladin can't just have all the options. At some point in its hand, it has to have Murlocs, other minions, something that doesn't deal with a giant minion, but at the same time, a lot of those minions are just also inherently answers.
Yeah, except for that's wrong. Their hand is just all things that answer things.
Ooh.
They have Equality, Tyrion, Wicker Flame, Sunkeeper, just so many cards that really shut down pretty much anything that Rutgers can play at this point.
Yeah, but you can't think like that. You can't think, okay, anything I play is just immediately going to be shut down. You got to keep going and just keep hoping you find them without an answer.
Equality is going to allow the steeded Aldor.
The mounted, would we say? The mounted Aldor?
I thought it is mounted now. There is the Stegodon.
Aldor Peacekeeper died, but Stegodon remains.
Yes. It's got to be kind of sad.
It is. Yeah. That Aldor Peacekeeper putting in a hero's work, slaying that giant. But yeah, we see here now the board in favor, continuing to be in favor for Poly Montreal, and Zoo just continuing to say, well, we have to play things and hope something goes unchecked.
Yeah, and this is getting pretty bad for Rutgers here. It looks like they're going to go for Soulfire and hope not to discard Doomguard. Or no, they're actually going to go ahead and play the 8/8 first, and they're going to discard Doomguard.
Yeah, we talked about coming into this that Noblord and the gang had some pretty extraordinary draws after putting themselves in a position to win. So, again, rewarded by the deck for consistent play, but now, that was certainly not what you wanted to see.
No. And now for Montreal, they even have the opportunity to Sunkeeper Terram here if they want to just trade, attack into one of the 1/1s, Sunkeeper Terram trade into the Bittertide Hydra, and then have Terram versus and a 3/3 versus a 3/3. Or rather, I can even use a hero power, so they have 2 3/3s as well.
Yeah, definitely options here.
Yeah, there's a lot of powerful plays available to Poly Montreal. They could even just use Equality and play the Defender plus the Wicker Flame. So many strong options available. I have to think that they're very likely to go with the Terram here. Yeah. This will leave them with 3 minions, one of which is a 3/7 taunt against a single 3/3. Sunkeeper Terram is just so powerful.
Really is just an absurd card in terms of what it does as a board effect, and then also the way the stats line up for a minion with taunt.
Right.
It's so good against aggressive decks. And, again, you have the option to do really good things to mid-range decks.
Yeah, a lot of people, when they were looking at it initially, were thinking, okay, well, this is a card that it's bad if your opponent has minions. It's like, well, no, not really, because if you have any minions, they just trade with your opponent's minions, and also it takes 4 things to actually hit you through Sunkeeper Terram.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, gosh, this card would be really great if I had a hero power that made minions.
God. And Poly Montreal picking up Consecration. They're already very much in the driver's seat, but that may just be the nail in the coffin for Rutgers here, as they're going to be able to sweep off this entire board pretty much from Rutgers.
Yeah, and Zoo obviously has the life tap hero power, which does allow them to, over time, rebuild boards, but they pretty much, Noblord and Rutgers pretty much pushed everything into the center. They said, these are our chips. If you got something better than this, then we're probably done.
And not only does Montreal have the ability, if they want, to clear off this board, their follow-up is incredible. They have Tyrion already in their hand. They have the Curator already in their hand. And by the way, there's another Tyrion in their deck if that one happens to go downhill.
No second Tyrion pick off the second Stonehill Defender, but second-rate Bruiser.
Shucks.
Yeah, I was going to say, I guess they'll just be rich enough. Yeah, choosing not even to use the equality there gets rid of a lot of the board, and I like that decision, and obviously the stats were as such to where you were essentially just getting rid of an extra wounded defender of Argus.
Yeah, so, yep, just going to go ahead and push 3 damage to the face, and Direwolf Alpha plus Life Tap, that's just not going to be enough. Ravasaur Run could go for an Evolve? No. And now, for the first time in a long time, Rutgers is behind overall in this match.
Yeah, I mean, this is 2 consecutive lost games, and this has got to feel great for Poly Montreal. I can't feel like Rutgers is at all sweating this. Noblord, as someone who's been through HCT, is no stranger to the rigors of long tournaments that come with victories and defeats, but I definitely need to see them turn it around if they're going to win the series.
Yeah, one thing that I've talked about to a number of players who are longtime competitive players in any scene, if you want to be good at a game, you got to get good at losing at that game because you're going to do a lot of it, and you need to be able to keep your head about you when it's happening. And this is potentially a best of 9 series. We've played 3 games. We are a third of the way through, so a lot of Hearthstone left to be played. See how things have gone so far, though. We do see the check mark go to the Paladin deck from Poly Montreal. We see they are leading overall in 2-1 in games in the series, but important to note, this is about winning sets. So you have to win 2 games within a best of 3 set. You do that in 2 sets in the 3 sets of the match. You win the match and, in this case, the tournament.
Yeah, and we are going to be heading over back to set 1 for game number 2. Now, if Rutgers takes this, that will be a set in their favor, so have to think that's the road to turning this series back into their favor. Obviously, they're far from out of it. There's still a lot of Hearthstone to be played, but wrapping up one of those sets is certainly something they want to accomplish here.
Winning's good.
Yep, high-level analysis.
There you go.
Winning good. What is losing?
Bad.
Losing bad. We see here in Group 1, though, it was Priest and Mage left for Poly Montreal. These are 2 classes which, in their own rights, have certainly found powerful archetypes within the Journey to Un'Goro meta.
Yeah, Poly Montreal playing the Dragon Priest archetype, which many people thought would essentially have died out with the departure of the Blackrock Mountain adventure from the standard format, though there's still a lot of power here with the Dragonite Operatives, with Netherspite Historian, lots of tools to play long attrition-based games.
Yeah, seeing the crowd there all engaged in the numerous fireside gatherings. They're all playing each other on Hearthstone, having a great time out here. We see some signs being held up, and yeah,
that one
looks like a great
glows
time.
in the dark. What's going on?
No, I think it's actually a Twitch emote. So, yeah.
But is it glowing Twitch emote?
I think it's just a lighting.
Okay.
Yeah. But we see here it is going to be Freeze Mage for Poly Montreal, and Rutgers is going to be playing its Miracle Rogue.
And this is pretty much always a tough matchup for the Rogue. These Rogue decks are mostly looking to end up getting a little bit of early aggression on and then make a late game push with, say, Leroy plus Cold Blood, Eviscerate, things like that to burst your opponent down. That doesn't work terribly well when your opponent has an Ice Block.
Yeah. As we mentioned just a moment ago, the score you're seeing on the left only indicative of this set. So Rutgers needs to win this game, and then they will win the set and bring them closer to winning the match.
Yeah, and we mentioned the Poly Montreal up in each of the other sets. So this is pretty crucial for Rutgers to get a leg up in the series overall.
Yeah, so Freeze Mage, definitely a deck that's been on the rise, largely in response to Rogue. So have to think Poly Montreal is feeling pretty good to get into this matchup.
And this is a pretty good hand, all things considered, for Rutgers. The Edwin Van Cleef is one of the potentially powerful tools you can use to get a large minion on the board early, which can threaten the mage that is out of range of most of its damage-based removal.
Yeah, I also want to point out another powerful tool now in the hand of Poly Montreal is that Primordial Glyph.
Yes.
On numerous occasions, I know when facing Rogue, I've actually Primordial Glyph to look for tools to slow down or deal with Edwin Van Cleef. Such a versatile, flexible spell for Mage.
Yeah, the card's busted. It's okay.
No,
It's okay.
no, I think it's just great.
I mean, by busted, I don't mean anything's wrong with it. I just mean it's super powerful, and we're going to see fired off in turn number 2 here from Poly Montreal. So not waiting to get any information about what they might want to find, just looking to use their mana efficiently here.
Yeah, a couple of very different choices here. Now, Mirror Entity would not be bad, especially for what you're expecting early on from the Rogue. Cards like Shaku, Edwin Van Cleef, even Sherazin Corpse Flower, but they're choosing to go with the Frostbolt there, which very reasonable direct damage, allows you to deal with possible minion pressure. Spellbender, I think, could also be a consideration if you're looking to protect the Doomsayer, but choosing to go with something a bit more proactive.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that sometimes you see, even if a team has a Primordial Glyph available in the early turns, they might wait and hold it to give them more information about what kind of cards they're going to need in that particular game. Though a 0-cost Frostbolt is never going to be bad.
Yeah, that definitely never goes out of style. Now, Shaku on the board. Shaku, an extremely powerful minion for Rogue, offers them more resources, obviously comes in stealth, so it basically gets initiative most of the time.
And Shaku, against Mage, Freeze Mage in particular, can give you some very powerful tools. If you find a burn spell, can help you finish your opponent off through freeze effects. If you, in fact, find an ice block, you can really mess up their plan to kill you over a number of turns while protecting themselves.
Yeah, have to think, as much as Freeze Mage would like to just dig deeper into the deck and start assembling the combo pieces to win the game, Shaku is a minion you really cannot let live.
Oh, yeah. And it does essentially demand removal. And thankfully for Poly Montreal, they do have at least that 0-cost Frostbolt, so it won't even necessarily throw their mana off. But we are going to see the Shaku activate that ice barrier that just came down. So a little bit more work that Rutgers is going to have to do. And what does he steal from the Mage? Oh, it's Counterspell.
That is a very, very good pickup.
Yeah, there are a number of secrets that can be pretty strong in this particular matchup. Counterspell is one of the best because oftentimes your opponent as a Freeze Mage is forced to kind of be required to play certain cards in certain turns just in order to sequence their spells in a certain way and stay alive through your potential damage. So Counterspell, being able to throw your opponent's mana off, can be absolutely huge. You could even potentially see, a board setting up a big Van Cleef and then with prep Counterspell involved as part of that sequence.
Yeah, that said, Poly Montreal does have the coin, which is a fairly useful way to test for Counterspell, but worth noting, their version of Freeze Mage is running Archmage Antonidas, which you obviously benefit from having the coin, as opposed to that double Pyroblast build.
Yeah, and I think we will see Rutgers, if they do decide to use that Counterspell, may wait until they can potentially see that coin used, or at least in a turn that using coin and getting the coin counterspelled won't leave Poly Montreal with enough mana to do what they are trying to stop with the counterspell in the first place.
We did see Sherazim Corpse Flower come down, and that is definitely a minion you want to get down early. That's where it's going to be getting the most value as it continues to either demand attention or push 5 damage, which is absolutely not an insignificant amount of damage.
I think that is another one of the cards that was vastly underrated by a number of players in their evaluation of Ungoro cards, because Sherazim is, by itself, it hits pretty hard. It's a 5-attack minion for 4 mana, and it is far easier to revive than I think most people anticipated.
Yeah, especially with, we see there the Razor Petal Lasher. That is a minion that puts a spell in hand. So as you're generating spells from Razor Petal Lasher, Shaku, Swashbuckler, that's adding resources into your hand that you can find organic ways to use to bring back shares and just continue to represent damage.
And that Lasher is kind of an interesting option for Rutgers now. They could go for a perhaps Razor Petal Lasher into prep Counterspell Edwin if they want this turn to set up a big minion. Again, they are facing the threat of the coin being used to stop the Counterspell. So we may actually just see the slower play here come out and not necessarily invest quite as much. But it looks like, they're going to go ahead and prep out the Counterspell. I think one of the big things here is that they want to stop the possibility of Frostnova Doomsayer on this board going to turn 5. Yes, there is the coin, but you may not necessarily see the coin kind of want to be used to be if it is wasted. Fortunately for Poly Montreal, though, they still have that 0-cost Frostbolt that can help them remove things even if something does get countered.
Yeah, and at that point, Rutgers is basically saying to Poly Montreal, like, we've set a little trap for you here. Are you going to navigate it correctly? Again, wanting to point out, though, that that score you're seeing on the left-hand side, that is just for set number 1. So that is 1 game for Rutgers in set number 1. They will need to win this game in order to close out the first set. They'll need to, again, win an additional set if they want to win the match and ultimately the finals.
And here, this is a kind of tough spot for Rutgers. Pretty crucial turn here. There's a lot of power on the other side of the board, and a number of minions that are frankly pretty tough to deal with. An 8/8 Van Cleef is definitely threatening to get a lot of damage in quickly, and they do have Doomsayer, but there is no Frost Nova, no freeze effects outside of that single Frostbolt. So they're going to need to navigate around both the just overall threat of this board and what they think this secret might be.
Yeah, this is just a tough situation over for Poly Montreal, but it's going to begin, unsurprisingly, with them testing with the coin for that counterspell. It is, in fact, counterspell. And had it not been, they would have had 6 mana to play with, so certainly not the end of the world if they're wrong on that call. Better to be safe there.
Yeah, and here, interestingly, Poly Montreal recognizing, okay, well, we want to get rid of this this Van Cleef, but we also want to get our card draw going. So they decide, rather than say Frostbolt plus Fireball down the Van Cleef, they can just wait. They can use their mana to play the Acolyte and ping it, and then just be able to kill the Van Cleef the following turn with the Frostbolt because of the cost reduction from the Glyph.
Yeah, and card draw right now is extremely important for Poly Montreal. For a Freeze Mage, they actually have a relatively small hand. It doesn't necessarily have a lot of super valuable resources for the moment. Have to think they want to start digging for some freezes to combo with that Doomsayer, just to get the board safe, to buy them the time to begin asserting their agenda.
And Rutgers clearing off the Acolyte before playing Fan, didn't want to give over an extra card to Montreal, and pick up a Hallucination, which can be pretty interesting in this matchup for the same reasons as the Shaku cards we talked about earlier. They're a little bit more reliable than a random card. And just looking to push damage quickly, though. They recognize they're playing against Freeze Mage. They need to keep the clock going and not give the Poly Montreal team time to find those crucial freeze effects and ice blocks.
Yeah, and I think Rutgers making the read there on that prior turn where you see Frostbolt come out and then Acolyte ping. It definitely seems like the Mage is digging and doesn't necessarily have like anything too intuitive to do, so now might just be the time to strike.
And one interesting thing here, because Poly Montreal chose to take that line with their Acolyte last turn to try and dig, they're now kind of committed to killing this Edwin this turn with Fireball, which is most of their mana. They have 6 mana. They don't have a freeze effect. They did not find Frost Nova or Blizzard. So they are in a pretty rough spot in terms of dealing with just the raw threat that Rutgers has been able to get down on this board.
Yeah, it's a very interesting chess match going on right now because both teams kind of telegraphing things and making commitments to turns coming up. And yeah, if they don't deal with the Edwin Van Cleef, which, as you pointed out, does use most of their mana, they're bringing their health total down to low enough to the point where, an Eviscerate could just end it.
Yeah, and they do choose to Fireball, and I imagine ping off the Razor Petal Lasher, but this is still 8 damage, rather 7 damage. 8 damage. Math checks out. From the
you know what? I was going to say, I think you got there.
For some reason, I looked and saw the Razor Petal Lasher as well, but, and this, it's not quite half of the remaining life total from Poly Montreal here, but the Hallucinations picked up. They do find an SI agent.
I like this. Just jam the SI7 agent, target face, and just keep going. The Mage has yet to show you that they have any freeze. This is a situation, frankly, that would have demanded a board freeze a while ago. So if they're not showing you that, I like it. Just keep going. What are you really losing if something is to come out that clears the board? Cherizim is probably just coming right back.
It's interesting, the Hallucination, Rutgers could play Hallucination now. They could also hold on to it because it is a 1-cost spell that if, for instance, their Cherizim were to die this turn, let's say there's no Flame Strike, rather, in the Poly Montreal deck, but they do have Primordial Glyph. If they discovered a Flame Strike, cleared this board.
Could be Foul-Nosed Blizzard, yeah.
Right, exactly. You could very easily recover your Cherizim with these cheap spells in your hand.
Yeah, that's clearly the debate going on right now. I think this is one of the few times where a total turn hasn't been 100% mapped out before they've pulled the trigger on it, but curious to see what they do. I think there's really validity in both plays.
Yeah, you may need all of your mana the next turn to maximize your turn, but they do decide to hold on to Hallucination. Another thing about holding the Hallucination here, it does give them more information before they make the Discover effect. And the fact that it's only a single mana means that most of the time you can kind of weave it in alongside the rest of what you want to do in a turn.
Yeah, as we were pointing out, merit to both holding or casting the hallucination there, but they're definitely knocking on the door right now and pushing the damage. And Poly Montreal once again whiffs on drawing the freeze spell, and there is no Arcane Intellect. They could put down Acolyte of Pain and start pinging, but then they don't have enough mana to play the Ice Block, which seems very important right now.
Yeah, they I think feel like if they don't have a freeze here, they're committed to playing Ice Block this turn because the threat of burst is so high from the Rogue at this point. You're only at 12, so. Maybe they play Ice Block. They could valet down one of these minions, but even if you do that, there's still just the threat of a single Eviscerate ending the game, or at least breaking your Ice Block.
Yeah, that is definitely something to be concerned about. So the valet is going to come down, reduce some of the damage, but again, you know that Sherazan's coming right back.
Yeah, and we see here the 6 on the board plus the Razor Petal, Eviscerate, and Dagger next turn is enough to break Ice Block if they just send everything to the face.
Yeah, worth pointing out there that Poly Montreal is essentially trying to put that Doomsayer, hoping that it manages to either get traded into to absorb health or it is allowed to actually activate.
And Greater Arcane Missiles is an interesting, powerful card here. They could potentially use to close out the game, but it looks like they're probably going to have the opportunity here to just break the block, push Poly Montreal all the way down to 1 life. The Greater Arcane Missiles can potentially help finish the game if their opponents do get a second Ice Block down and then Alexstrasza themselves. So now I think they may be trying to figure out if there's a way for them to maneuver to break the block and kill the Doomsayer. They have a second hallucination, so there are a number of options as well. And with Cold Blood plus Eviscerate, it's interesting because they didn't choose to commit either of these first. Because if they had chosen to, say, Cold Blood on the first attacking minion, then Razor Petal Dagger, it doesn't really work out. Oh, what do they find here off the hallucination? Meteor. Okay, well, Meteor, not quite enough to actually clear off, not quite enough mana to actually play that this turn. And they are going to just go ahead and break the Ice Block, leaving themselves with the Eviscerate, Meteor, Arcane Missiles in hand.
I want to point out Sherazan's about to wake up and then just go right back to sleep. He's like, anybody need me? Nope? Okay.
My alarm went off way too early.
Yeah. It's like 4 in the morning. Sherazan's like, I'm going back to bed. But yeah, that is going to be a clear... I'm sorry, I love the art for Sherazan, the pod, just the eyes, just staring out like, don't you wake me up.
Yeah. But I think the Meteor pick, by the way, from Rutgers is recognition of the threat of Alexstrasza. That they think, okay, well, we can dagger them down next turn through their Doomsayer, and they're only out at that point, or rather through their Ice Block. The only out at that point is them Alexstraszaing themselves. Meteor gives you a way to kill the 8/8 Alexstrasza, which is absolutely crucial in terms of not giving the Freeze Mage the ability to just take the board back and finish the game off.
Extremely important to be able to deal with those situations. Meanwhile, Poly Montreal just digging, trying to find something, but they are rapidly running out of time in this particular game.
Well, Razor Petal Lashel found for Rutgers here. And I expect we will see, they're going to go ahead and just Razor Petal it. So they wanted to ensure that there wasn't a second Ice Barrier, not just attacking into with their dagger, so guaranteed to break the block. And now it is a must Alexstrasza self-turn from Poly Montreal. Pick up a Blizzard, which potentially gives them more time in future turns.
Yeah, I think playing Alexstrasza here, they're at 1 health. There is no other option.
You got to do it.
But it's worth thinking through the turn and really taking this opportunity to think through potential turns.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there is theoretically the possibility that they get an Ice Barrier and want to play Ice Barrier and don't respect the possibility of something like Eviscerate or a damage spell from the hallucination. But yeah, it looks like it will, in fact, be the Alexstrasza. And Rutgers does have the Meteor to deal with it, but they don't have a big board to help finish things off just yet. Ooh, Vilespine Slayer. It's actually kind of interesting because that does develop a minion as well.
Yeah, but the mana to actually activate it, you'd have to basically use the reduced Eviscerate here. But no, that's just a Giant Meteor, one of the coolest animations in the set, and, well, Giant Dragon God.
And now, with the threat of Greater Arcane Missiles plus Eviscerate next turn, there's a lot of burst damage available to Rutgers.
Yeah, they're probably going to have to look at just playing down a minion. And if the minion just comes down, Antonidas, I mean, yeah, you can Arcane Intellect and you draw some cards there, make a fireball, but again, you're not really progressing anywhere near towards a win condition, and this is a lot of times what happens to Freeze Mage. They need to be doing multiple things at once, setting the block, bringing their opponents low, and chaining together a multiple turn strategy to just burn them out.
And we talked pretty early on about how crucial the Edwin Van Cleef, the Sherazin, were for the Rogue to be able to get a solid offense going, keep the clock on the Mage. The fact that the ice blocks were broken before Alexstrasza meant that they had to Alexstrasza themselves, which means there's no just chain of events where they can just play the Alexstrasza and the opponent, burn them out over 2 turns.
Yeah, and Sherazin is fairly intuitive, right? You have it on turn 4, you're going to play it, especially against a deck like Freeze Mage, but the decision to make the Edwin Van Cleef when they did is very much a correct read of, okay, what is our opponent doing and what is our window? They hadn't seen any freeze up until that point, so it felt okay to just start pushing damage.
And it may seem like the fact that the counterspell only hit coin was a poor use of counterspell or a weak use of counterspell. The fact that there was no coin meant that the Alexstrasza had to come out on turn 9. There's no ability to Alexstrasza opposing face and still protect yourself with ice blocks thanks to the coin.
Okay, this could still just be lethal depending on where these arcane missiles go, and with Leroy...
No, it's still not guaranteed to be lethal.
Yeah, with Leroy, 1 off.
Leroy Eviscerate is 1 damage off lethal. Greater Arcane Missiles plus Eviscerate. If 2 Greater Arcane Missiles go to face, that's the same as a Leroy. That's actually kind of interesting. They could just Leroy Vile Spine, Leroy hits face.
You could even go so far as to dagger one of the 1/1 whelps if you're afraid of something happening there. But yeah, I mean, you've seen Alexstrasza, you've seen 2 ice blocks. The only thing left in here would be, I believe, a second copy of Barrier.
And even in that case, your hand is Eviscerate Greater Arcane Missiles.
Yeah, you got damage.
You got damage to spare.
Yeah.
Especially now, Montreal is essentially forced to use some kind of AoE on this board, either damage or freeze.
They did finally find a Blizzard, but no Doomsayer to go with it, and at this point they're just limping along. They're trying to essentially run the Rogue out of resources. Don't know what the last 2 cards are in Ludicolo's hand, but have to have some idea.
Yeah, it's got to be scary because your opponents have a Mage card from Hallucination. There's a very good chance a discovered Mage card for this Rogue deck is going to be some kind of burn.
Yeah, and then that last card from the Rogue, you can probably put 2 and 2 together and make at least a safe read that it is some form of direct damage. And if it was Cold Blood, that would not have been lethal. No, so it could potentially be Cold Blood.
Well, Poly Montreal trying to figure out if there's a way out of this. They can Barrier Blizzard, attack the face. Seems like probably overall their best option to try and survive. But they will get the bad news that Ice Barrier does not protect you from Greater Arcane Missiles.
Deciding where to put that Whelp, whether or not they want to just set up that Slayer for death. And yeah, this is just going to be ripping the missiles and use the magic to kill the Mage.
It's a cool animation.
Yeah, it's a fun card.
Yeah, and this will be the first overall set win in the match. So Rutgers takes this set. So they lead overall in the match win condition here, though Montreal does lead in the other 2 sets.
Yeah, if you're looking at individual games right now, it is technically tied at 2 and 2, but that doesn't matter here because what matters is getting those set wins. Yeah,
and we're going to take a look in a moment, I imagine, at how things are at this point. There we go. So we see the check mark on Ludicolo's side. 2 wins in that set means Rutgers wins set number 1. We're going to jump into one of the other sets here where, as we mentioned, Montreal leads in each of them.
Yeah, that's the good news for Poly Montreal. Obviously, you have to win 2 sets here to win the match, so important for them to already have a leg up in those other 2 sets. They can still feel pretty good about how this series is going, despite that last loss.
And I believe we're going to set number 3 here. So it will be set 3, game number 2. We have Rogue and Warrior available for Montreal, and Hunter and Shaman available for Rutgers.
Yeah, so a couple different ways to take this, and Poly Montreal having Rogue and Warrior there, those are 2 extremely powerful classes at the moment. We obviously just saw how good Rogue can be. Warrior, kind of embarrassingly rich at this point in their lives. They have 2 top-tier archetypes. Rutgers bringing the Hunter and the Shaman, so as we've talked about, Hunter mostly being played a similar way, and since we do have the deck list, we know exactly how they're playing it. The Shaman, though, for Rutgers is definitely an interesting talking point because understanding that Elemental Shaman has yet to really perform on the big stage in a way that's all that impressive, they pretty much called audible and went another direction with it.
Yeah, actually, both of these teams have different Shaman decks. There's the kind of like Jade board flood-ish Shaman deck from Rutgers, which has even Primal Fin Totem, which has actually been really impressive every time we've seen it so far, giving you more tools along with Firefly and the kind of pirate package. Not even the South Sea deckhands. They have Bloodsuck Corsairs, really respecting the weapon classes, and being able to generate a big board. They have double Bloodlust in their deck. So they're just looking to play out a bunch of stuff and eventually kill you in a big burst or whittle you down with Flame Tongue Totem, as we see in their hand.
Yeah, and that's important to note. A lot of times one Bloodlust will be included in a deck as kind of an auxiliary win condition. Like, back in the day, I think that was certainly more of a powerful approach. You know, I've got stuff on the board. That's what Shaman does. I will just Bloodlust you out. But if you're running 2 Bloodlusts, that's not an auxiliary win condition anymore. That is the win condition.
Yeah, this is a Bloodlust deck, effectively. Their whole goal is to play cards that generate multiple things, whether they are Corsair into Patches, or Firefly into Flame Elemental, or just the Primal Fin Totems making Murlocs, or frankly just their hero power. Their goal is to have a bunch of stuff in play and finish you off with a big burst of damage from Bloodlust.
Yeah, looking over at Poly Montreal, they will be bringing out the Taunt Warrior. That is the Quest Warrior, and obviously the name of the game there, play Taunts, get Sulphur's, Hand of Ragnaros, activate the hero power, but there are some interesting twists to this particular matchup.
Yeah, well, one thing I think I was kind of wondering, I thought we were going to debate whether they were going to mulligan their Quest, because that's kind of a hotly debated thing in terms of a lot of matchups, and I think they kind of came to the conclusion that this is a opposing deck that is sufficiently aggressive that they need to have all of their tools at their disposal and can't afford to give up a card to get that Quest.
Yeah, you must be this aggressive for me to mulligan away my Quest, and Rutgers Shaman deck definitely passes muster, as it is a very forward-facing deck that is looking to burst you out early. So this doesn't necessarily activate in the same way Elemental Shaman does, which is, okay, we're going to play this slow, steadied, measured game where we're going to just eventually play increasingly powerful elementals. It is dumping stuff on the board and going.
Yeah, it's going to get you. That's the plan. It's get you. And Poly Montreal respecting that. Just a coin out of War Axe. They also, crucially, Bloodsuck Corsair, potentially take out that War Axe. I think they're going to play on curve, though. Yeah, we see the Bloodmage Stylus come down. They want to use their mana efficiently here.
Yep.
The Corsair taking out the remaining charge of the War Axe isn't that threatening when your board is just 2 small minions anyway. So I think that we're going to see Rutgers look to play the 2-drop here and potentially play Corsair plus a hero power another turn.
Yeah, and that's what's always so impressive to me about the top-tier players is the ability to read, okay, look, I have something that takes a charge off a weapon. There is a weapon in play with 1 charge, but that doesn't actually necessarily advance me to my win condition, as cool as it feels to break a weapon. So making the intelligent decision to fill out the mana curve and even playing down a card that cycles into something else.
And from Rutgers' side here, or rather from Montreal's side, they have an Armor Smith, which is great against this board. A couple of small minions. And they're going to go ahead and take out the Bloodmage Thalnos. Mana Tide Totem, a nice draw for Rutgers. I imagine they have, they feel like it's not terribly likely there's another War Axe in the hand, so Mana Tide Totem can potentially threaten to pick them up some extra resources.
What's really important about this Armor Smith, too, is looking at that stat line. This plays so well against Flame Tongue Totem, which is one of the things you normally worry about when you leave small minions on the board, is Flame Tongue coming out, boosting them, suddenly making them a very real threat. But Armor Smith just barely dodges that to where, at this point, you would essentially not really accomplish anything.
Yeah, Armor Smith is a card that has found its way into a lot of the Taunt Warrior decks. Kind of a card that was very popular in essentially every controlling Warrior deck for a long time, but kind of got pushed out for just more removal. But now, in particular, when you have more minions with the Taunt minions, and also just it's great against both the sort of burn-style freeze mages, as well as just against decks with patches. Kills all the small minions. And the Mana Tide Totem, though, going to get a little bit more action for Rutgers.
Now, I have to think right out of the gate that the Fiery War Axe is going to come down and deal with the Mana Tide Totem, but drawing Stonehill Defender at least makes you consider still. Denying Shaman card draw is so powerful because Shaman doesn't have much of it at all.
It's true, and in particular, this version of Shaman from Rutgers is pretty reliant on a critical mass of stuff. Those Bloodlusts are powerful, but they're only powerful if you are able to establish a strong board. And now this Bloodsuck Corsair potentially able to find some value here, though the Jade Lightning, a mana-efficient way to remove this Armor Smith. I imagine we're probably going to see that actually, well, they're debating firing it off, because obviously the Bloodsuck Corsair has some appeal here, but it's just so inefficient as far as how you overall use your resources for your turn.
Agreed, but it feels so bad to Jade Lightning a damage armor smith. I'm actually in physical pain imagining it. That damage could be put to purpose so many other places. I want to point out really quickly, in Poly Montreal's hand is 2 Brawls, and we just discussed what the win condition of this Shaman deck was. I don't want to say that makes this an insurmountable matchup for Rutgers, but it's definitely great tools for Poly Montreal to have. And if they use them intelligently, that's going to get them through a lot of the storm.
Certainly. Brawl, very crucial. Whirlwind as well. There's lots of small minions. We see a 1/1 Jade sitting on the board right now. And we may even just see the Acolyte plus Whirlwind come down to clear off the minion, draw Poly Montreal a card as well. Or just the Stonehill Defender can give them potentially the ability to curve into something. There's a 1 attack minion in play, so even with a Flame Tongue, your Stonehill 1/4 will eat it and not die itself.
Yeah, the Acolyte of Pain would not be so lucky there. Could play down the Acolyte of Pain and look to Whirlwind. I do like that play as you're not really sitting on a lot of proactive options, but Stonehill Defender could also just award you a proactive option. So pick your poison.
Yeah, number of attractive options, certainly. The Acolyte plus Whirlwind. No, just going to Acolyte. No Whirlwind at all. Interesting.
Yeah, if Rutgers chooses to go the way of Flame Tongue Totem here, a little bit of a punish, but certainly not the end of the world.
Well, here, the Bloodsteel Corsair does get a little bit of value, is able to clear off the War Axe. Oh, they're still debating, though. I mean, I would expect to see Totem plus Corsair plus Flame Tongue to deny the value from the Acolyte here.
And more importantly, perhaps, you are starting to generate that board.
Right.
Things are sticking. Both Fiery War Axes are gone. So at this point, you're saying, okay, it's got to be something else that's going to clear up the board.
Well, and frankly, this is the last opportunity you have until Sulfuras to get value from the Corsair here, too. Which is one of their arguments to potentially have played it the previous turn. If your opponent was going to attack into the minion, you wouldn't have an opportunity. But if they're taking a 1/1, you get off Jade Lightning. You're not feeling too bad that you induced that attack.
And often, if Sulfuras comes out, the actual weapon itself is less of the problem you're experiencing.
Right.
Obviously, having a weapon equipped is always powerful for trades, doing direct damage. But by the time that Die Insect Hero Power comes out, you've got bigger fish to fry.
Especially considering they mulliganed the quest. So if
Yeah.
Sulfuras does come out, it's not going to be for a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, there's very real potential that Poly Montreal will never actually finish that quest, depending how far down that quest is in the deck.
They're on a very different kind of quest here, which is play big taunts, stay alive.
It's a noble calling, playing taunts and not dying to Shaman. Many of us have been enjoying that calling for some time, but admittedly, it's a little easier these days, as Shaman certainly less of a powerhouse explosive class, at least in the early game.
The second Armor Smith coming out here, throwing another wrench into Rutgers' plan, going to make attacking into and killing the Stonehill Defender a little bit less appealing.
Yeah, 1/4 turns out is a pretty good stat line against Shaman.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
It's not bad. Looking for spell power here to power up these Maelstroms, does not find it, so we may actually see double Maelstrom here in order to clear off both of these and develop more of a board, though Jade Claw is also fairly attractive option to power up further Jades when Aya does come down.
Yeah, I was going to point out, certainly Wrath of Air Totem, the most attractive option based on what's in your hand, but Healing Stream Totem is actually pretty okay.
It is, especially considering we know there's a Whirlwind in the other team's hand, so going to give you the ability. Ooh, and that's got to be scary. Your opponent's deck has 2 Bloodlusts in it, and a Wind Fury minion just came off of a Maelstrom portal.
Yeah, and even Whirlwind out of the picture, Sleep with the Fishes is in the deck. And Sleep with the Fishes, while you would normally think, okay, I'm just going to save it for a kind of bigger board to potentially combo, again, as Poly Montreal, it doesn't necessarily take a giant board of mid-range minions to actually kill you when there's 2 Bloodlusts in the deck.
Right. Though, in Poly Montreal's seat, they are at 31 life thanks to all the armor from those Armor Smiths. So even a Bloodlust here is not quite going to be enough.
What now?
I'm actually watching Brian Kibler math in real life. This is exciting stuff here.
I think it's actually 28 that they'd be able to do next turn, if everything mathed out correctly in my head.
Yeah, this is definitely an interesting board because Poly Montreal has to have a little bit of brinksmanship here, and they're just deciding, look, we have 2 brawls. Let's just pull the trigger. The Shaman's on 3 cards. We'll start building our win condition after we run the Shaman out of resources, and that's pretty much what it's going to come down to, especially against this style of Shaman deck.
Well, Aya is always a pretty good card to play after your opponent brawls you, getting a 5/3 and a 3/3 with that Death Rattle also waiting.
You know, we didn't see during that quiz that question, what is a girl's best friend? I was really expecting golems to come up, but that would have been that sort of question I would have included in trivia. But yeah, Rutgers refilling the board here.
Are you just like calling out the people who made the trivia? You're like, you should have put that in.
I mean, look, if you get on the desk, we're here for the people, but obviously we have our own agendas. I'm just here to fix trivia.
Fair to fix it. So you're saying it's broken?
Well, let's not say things we can't take back. / get me in trouble later.
All right, well, the Curator going to protect Poly Montreal from this board pretty well. You know, the 4/6 body definitely holds off Aya and this Jade Golem by itself. And Rutgers, they're getting to the stage of the game where they have to be really afraid of just the material advantage that Poly Montreal has been able to generate. They know the Curator means a Primordial Drake in the opposing team's hand, so small minions are going to be very hard to stick to the board.
Yeah, that is a big issue for them to contend with. And at some point, you have to think, they're kind of thinking, okay, where's my Bloodlust? This is what I need. We put 2 in the deck. We do need it, but again, wanting to capitalize. Unlike Freeze Mage and other decks, there really isn't the ability to just dig through the deck to find the win condition you need. So Shaman very much at the mercy of what is very slow card draw.
Yeah, going to go ahead and get that Flame Tongue down and get some pressure in. And you know, now, again, they know Primordial Drake's in the hand. They're hoping there's not a second Brawl in the hand, but I imagine very shortly they're going to get some bad news that this board they have developed is not going to stick around.
Yeah, this is a big, intimidating board, and Poly Montreal has a glut of options in terms of how they want to deal with it. Brawl, obviously, you know, splashiest, going to remove all but 1 minion, but Aya Blackpaw will, on some level, potentially restock it should she die with a 4/4 Jade Golem.
What now?
What now, indeed. A lot of options, big hand here.
Yeah, Brawl definitely jumps out at me as being the most direct line. And again, you're seeing your opponent on 2 cards. You've seen Aya Blackpaw, which of all the minions in this deck is the only one that's really generating a large threat on the board, and multiple threats, in fact. So I wouldn't hate the Brawl here, but they could just potentially hide behind their taunt, and but then you're playing into Bloodlust. I don't know, maybe it is just Brawl time.
It looks like going to go ahead and... All right, they're actually going to take a little bit different line. Shield Slam, Whirlwind, and Bloodhoof Brave. Okay, so they get rid of the Flame Tongue Totem.
That does reduce a lot of damage off the board.
It does, and it also means that Primordial Drake next turn is essentially guaranteed to kill Aya, at least. And it makes a potential draw of Sleep with the Fishes more powerful. Yeah, this is kind of an awkward spot at this point for Rutgers now, because they can't push too much damage here without using some of their significant resources. They don't necessarily want to Hex. Looks like they're going to attack Aya in. This, if they do attack the Aya in and get the Jade Golem, this opens them up much more to the threat of Brawl. And I think maybe that's something that was going through Montreal's mind. They wanted to try to induce the Brawl, or rather the Aya trade, to make their Brawl more powerful by making a play that makes it look like they didn't have access to Brawl.
Yeah, I would be curious here if Rutgers chooses to commit the Argent Squire. Again, this does play heavily into second Brawl, but at some point you just have to say, look, I'm playing to win, not to not lose.
Firebloom Heart, kind of a dead draw for Montreal. Not going to be a game where the quest is really the determining factor. Interestingly, the fact that they chose to play the last turn the way that they did means that even if they Brawl this turn, they don't have a minion to play, because they did commit the Bloodhoof Brave the previous turn. They could play an Acolyte, but nothing that will defend them directly.
Yeah, that said, though, if you're at 21 health and you Brawl away all but 1 minion, I mean,
You're
at that
feeling
point...
pretty good. You're feeling pretty good.
21 health is more like 1,000,000 health at that point until the board gets refilled.
It's just especially when there's so many small minions on the opposing side of the board, the chances that a substantial one lives is very, very low.
I mean, realistically, there's only 2 substantial options here. That said, no Execute in the hand to potentially deal with a thing from below. Looks like the Jade Golem would also survive, so definitely something worth considering.
Yeah, definitely taking their time. You know, we said coming in that they, were feeling a bit intimidated by Rutgers, but they, were going to take their time. And we see a little bit of a roll of the eyes from the Rutgers team. And who wins the fight? It's the Jade Golem. Okay, one of the better options available for Rutgers. So, this will give them a little bit of an offense remaining, but they are pretty quickly running out of gas. Bloodlust.
Oh, yeah.
That would have been great a little while ago.
That is definitely unfortunate for Rutgers fans there. That would have been great much earlier on, as they've set up 2 now really impressive boards that would just begging for a bloodlust.
And this may look a little bit weird, using the damage to kill the Acolyte, but they know for a fact there is a Primordial Drake in the opposing hand.
All right, so we could just see Poly Montreal potentially Direhorn Hatchling ×2 here. They could look to clear off the Jade Golem if they're very concerned about it. But again, Rutgers owns so few cards. Aya Blackpaw having already been played. What are you really necessarily even concerned about at this point if you're diligent in just over time putting up big walls?
Yeah, I think that this is very much leaning in the favor of Poly Montreal. The resources. You see just a roll of the head. Look at the disgust from Noblord there.
Noblord actually just looks like he took 8 damage. Like he did like the little fall backwards animation.
God. Not like this.
Yeah.
But yeah, and they know that Drake's remaining in the hand, so they are not going to be able to stick a board with totems to get those bloodlusts going. I mean, maybe they're just looking to trade in here, hex one of the hatchlings, kill the other one, and start toteming to kind of induce the Primordial Drake onto a board of just a couple of totems.
Yeah, you're definitely trying to find these silver linings to what is becoming an increasingly grim situation. And when in Hearthstone, games start going against you, you're forced to say, okay, it's fine, just calm down. How do we still find the win? And until you technically lose, that's how you have to approach the game.
Yeah, and a lot of fairly low impact cards even remaining in the Rutgers deck. Their deck is one that is pretty powerful to close out the game quickly if it's able to get a foothold on the board and the opponent doesn't have time to react. But they've given Poly Montreal a lot of time, and they have a lot of resources to work with.
Yeah, they've dodged so far both Primal Fin totems Rutgers has, and that is definitely one of the cards that early on can allow you to accelerate the state of your board to a place to begin pushing damage, even if it's just 1/1s. Although admittedly, since they haven't found the bloodlusts until this very point in the game, awfully enough, both in succession, yeah, they really just need the bloodlust to make this work.
And one of the big problems is once this Primordial Drake comes down, and I think we'll see it played this turn, not only will it wipe off the entire board from Rutgers, but it threatens to keep that board neutralized, because that 4/8 taunt minion can keep attacking into totems and make bloodlust a non-factor for pretty much the rest of the game.
Yeah, it's important to note because for a while here, aside from the Direhorn Hatchling turn, the Warrior hasn't necessarily been putting things on the board to address the concern of a totem being spawned every single turn. And that's actually how, if we look back at this game, a lot of the boards have been assembled. It's just constant commitment to toteming like every turn.
Yeah, and a lot of people, they look at your board state in a lot of games when you're playing Shaman. They're like, why don't you play Bloodlust in your deck? You always have a bunch of minions in play. You just kill them with Bloodlust. And then you see a hand like this, and you're like, I understand why some decks don't play Bloodlust.
I was going to say, yeah, to that point, I mean, some people make the argument all the time, like one Bloodlust is just its own win condition. And you're like, buddy, let me tell you some stories about Primal Drakes, sleeping with the fishes, brawls.
Devolve is, I mean, it's a reasonable card, but
yeah, you're going to turn an 8-mana minion into a 7-mana minion.
It's great when you're trying to punch through a taunt and finish the game. It's a great AOE hex essentially to kill a number of taunts. But now that Ali Armorsmith is going to come down and get Poly Montreal even further out of range, even if those Bloodlists were able to find an opportunity to connect. Well, there's just even more life to work with. And ooh. All right, like you said, 8-mana minion, now it's 7-mana minion. Oh, the Wind Chaser, Storm Chaser, that's the name of that guy.
Yep.
That can kill 2 totems a turn.
I remember when I used to be a dragon, and now I'm an elemental.
Those were the days.
Those were the days. But yeah, Primal Fin Totem finally found, way late to the party, and what it turns out now is almost moot, because again, the Warrior has a foothold and can clear 2 minions per turn with the Storm Chaser and another one with that Crystal Weaver.
I mean, say nothing of the Ravaging Ghoul, and
yeah.
Now a Stonehill Defender able to give even more time. We may even see the quest completed this game.
I mean, that's just the cherry on top.
I think it's at 3 or 4? 4?
I want to say 3.
I think it's 3. I think that's the 4th, is the Stonehill.
I mean, as we pointed out, this is largely irrelevant.
It doesn't really matter. I'm just kind of curious for my own edification.
Sure.
Oh, another Stonehill Defender. It could be anything. It could be another Stonehill Defender.
It could just be more Stonehill Defenders. And at this point, a 1-4 stat line
right.
is a massive wall.
If you are looking to complete the quest, well, just throwing more Stonehill defenders in the line, that works out pretty well.
It's all about recognizing the lines that help you not only win, but also really upset your opponent.
Yeah. It's got to demoralize them. They got another set after this, you know.
Yeah.
And if they are able to kind of end up breaking Rutgers' spirits, I mean, it has been Rutgers who, as we mentioned a number of times, they have not lost they had not lost more than 3 games in the previous 2 matches. Now, this is I believe the first set they may have lost. Yeah, Bloodlust into concede, and it will be Poly Montreal who wins this set. And now it's 1 set apiece, but it is Poly Montreal who leads in the remaining set.
Yeah, and to your point, this is the first time at this stage in the tournament that Rutgers has been in anything like this position. They are now facing elimination. They have to win the next 2 games in the set, or else they're done. And yeah, finishing second is fine, but these guys were expecting to win.
Yeah, we talked to the whole team. We see the results right there. That game did seal set number 3 for Poly Montreal, so we will be going to the final set, and this is one that I'm actually really excited to see because it has the aggro shaman from Poly Montreal, the handlock from Poly Montreal, the singleton priest from Rutgers, as well as the mage deck from Rutgers as well. So a lot of cool decks remaining that are going to decide this championship.
Yeah, so set 2 will be the battlefield of choice here again. Poly Montreal needs to win 1 more game. So for the moment, just forget about the other sets because we are in a final destination of sorts this last set where Poly Montreal needs 1 win. Rutgers needs 2, but this is definitely going to be an interesting series of games, assuming it goes past this first one, because these are some very unconventional decks for what we've been seeing.
Yeah, I think this is the only handlock deck that we saw throughout the entire field. Certainly the only singleton priest deck that we saw throughout the entire field. And how exactly some of these decks match up is kind of unclear because these are not decks you typically see in their normal metagame.
I was going to say, this is definitely not something we could probably pull out our phones and look up, but we can look up at this beautiful crowd here. We see them all hanging out, playing Hearthstone together, waving to us. How are you doing, friends? Thank you so much for coming out to the beautiful tavern here at the Esports Arena in Santa Ana.
Yeah, it really has been just an incredible experience all weekend long. The whole setup here, the decor and everything. I don't know if how many people here have been to Esports Arena before. It doesn't normally look like a tavern. There's been a lot of effort. Okay.
Shout out to Raynad sporting the 5-head.
The 5-head right there.
That might even be a 6-head. That was a large forehead.
That was something.
Yeah.
That was something.
Glad Raynad could be with us in picture form.
I'm broken now. I'm a broken man after that. But anyway. But these teams are not broken. They are here in the finals. This is win or go home for Rutgers here, and it will be that singleton priest deck they choose to lead things off.
Brian, contain your excitement. It's singleton priest time.
Oh, God. Ooh, yes.
Yeah, we are going to see that more aggressive shaman coming out there from Poly Montreal. Bittertide Hydra in a deck usually tells you, hey, I'm here to do things.
Yeah,
I'm here to get you.
I have a plan, and that plan involves your face just a couple of times. Don't need that many hits for 8.
Yeah, it's a bad time when you're a priest and you just suddenly look up at your meeting calendar and there's a schedule with a Bittertide Hydra just going to have a meeting. That's not going to go well.
Well, it depends, because if you do draw your 1 Shadow or Death,
yeah.
But the problem here for Rutgers, this is a deck that is capable of doing some very powerful things. Mind Vision, not clear to me how powerful that thing is, but they're keeping it in their opening hand, looking for something to do early on. Shadow Visions, they've got all kinds of vision. This is a visionary hand right here. They find Maelstrom Portal. That can be good against certain types of draws from the Shaman. But
it can also be pretty poor,
But
Brian.
this one, that does 1 damage. Those are 4 mana 7/7s.
Yeah, this is match point for Poly Montreal with a pair of 4 mana 7/7s in hand. So this is pretty much the Helm's Deep scene for Rutgers. They got to get behind the walls, and they have to outlast and survive the night to move on to the next game.
How has it come to this?
Ooh, it begins.
But, I mean, that Shadow Visions, that can find Shadow or Death.
Yeah.
Appropriately, Shadow Visions, Shadow or Death.
Well, that just adds up.
That's just,
yeah.
Math checks out.
Sure.
But they are playing Singleton Priest. They can only find 1 Shadow or Death. And they don't know necessarily that's what they're looking for right now. So it's going to be a tough spot for them to make the appropriate call here. And frankly, one of the issues with Shadow Visions, yes, it gives you access to additional copies of a lot of cards in your deck, but you have to spend the mana in order to get those. It sounds kind of like an obvious fact, but it means that sometimes you need to preemptively use your Shadow Visions to be able to efficiently use your turn. They are going to fire it off, and no Shadow or Death offer. They find a Dragonfire Potion. That does 5, not 7.
Yeah, that is an important number to note. And, going back to what you said, do they even know that they need to be digging for Shadow or Death? Looking over this deck list, yeah, there are some powerful big minions, Bittertide, Hydra, Flame Wraith, Faceless, but a lot of the minions are smaller and designed to, put on pressure in the early game, so it's certainly not an obvious call.
Yeah, they do already have a Shadow Word Pain, and they have that Maelstrom Portal that they picked up. So they have a lot of tools to deal with small things. What they are lacking is the ability to kill big minions. So I think if they had seen a Shadow or Death, they very likely would have picked it in anticipation of that threat. But right now, not an option, and they could very easily be on the business end of a Flame Wraith Faceless very soon.
Now, the good news for them is it looks like Poly Montreal's opening hand was not necessarily just filled with low-cost minions, so the game really isn't going to start for them until those Flame Wreath Facelesses come down. Like, Jade Claw's coming down right now, but that's certainly very manageable.
It's interesting because if I were in the spot for Poly Montreal, I think that one thing I would be considering is you are playing as a Singleton Priest deck. There's a Shadow or Death.
Yeah.
And you have 2 copies of Flame Wraith Faceless. They're overloading themselves going into their turn where they could coin one of these Flame Wraith Faceless out. So they're kind of setting themselves back from the ability to generate that much threat. I would not be surprised to see Rutgers just fire off that Maelstrom Portal here, especially because they have Powered Shield that can protect it from the Jade Claws.
Yeah, that would be a very heads-up play. I'm also fairly surprised by the decision to equip Jade Claws. You know what this deck is. You've seen the deck list. Wow, okay, so going to go ahead and Hero Power and not emote.
The light shall burn you.
I was going to say that the classic turn 2 play, obviously for Priest, would be Hero Power emote, but Noblord feeling serious now. This isn't the time to begin BOing.
Yeah, exactly. But now the South Sea deckhand, that can find patches and would make, that is going to give a serious amount of value to the Maelstrom Portal next turn for Rutgers if it does come down.
I want to make a point, too, that the Jade Claws there that we saw from Poly Montreal.
Punch Face thing just got healed.
Yeah, and more importantly, Shaman, this version of Shaman is actually running 2 copies of Things from Below, so you are getting like a pretty decent amount of value from actually just using the Hero Power.
And this, and they're going to get a Shield Bearer. That is a big roadblock for Poly Montreal here. I think they're debating whether they want to Powered Shield it, potentially dig for more. Yeah, it looks like they're going to shield it rather than heal themselves, want to get further into their deck. Doomsayer.
That is so potentially powerful in the coming turns.
Yeah, Doomsayer with a Shield Bearer protecting it is
Bring me your 4-mana 7/7.
Is pretty serious.
Yeah, Shield Bearer going to do an excellent job of protecting the Doomsayer.
If this Flame Wraith Faceless comes down, which I think it will.
It has to.
Yeah, you don't really have another option. As of now, the Overload means that they're going to have 3 mana next turn. They still will be able to coin out Jade Lightning and clear off the 0/6 taunt and the Doomsayer if it does come down.
This is a tense spot. I mean, you absolutely had to play that down, but okay.
All right, well, yeah, and
Raza coming online. This is a big deal.
And I think that Rutgers recognizes the threat that there is a pretty easy way, given that they still have the coin, they can get through this. And if they did get Jade Lightninged and had their Doomsayer killed by the Flame Wraith Faceless, they are so far behind. So they recognize they don't want to play into that possible easy clear that sets them back. They decide to commit the Raza, and now Raza giving them a lot of value every single turn with that free hero power.
Yeah, and in addition, board presence. I mean, you don't necessarily just have to worry about or look for that Shadow or Death to deal with the 4-mana 7/7. You could begin combining things like Dragonfire Potion plus the punch from Raza the Unchained. So, but to your point, yeah, that hero power just being free every turn is amazing. It's exactly what you want.
The big problem, though, for Rutgers is that, yes, they can heal for 2 every turn. 2 is much less than 7, and they are facing down that Flame Wraith. Math checks out.
Yeah, we got a chart back here. Don't worry, we're doing that calculations.
I got my calculator watch on from when I was in 7th grade.
Yep.
And
Brian's statements are being fact-checked.
Yeah. All right, so Lightning Bolt plus Maelstrom Portal, and they're going to push to the face here. Ooh, the taunt is big here too, and we see a just look of horror from Noblord, as that is a protected Flame Wreath Faceless. One good taunt deserves another. You know, Shield Bearer versus the Goldshire Footman.
Yeah, did you think Goldshire Footman had forgotten? Did you think he had forgiven? No, he's coming back to influence the Hearthstone Collegiate Championship, and what a great time for him if you're Poly Montreal.
And this is definitely a tough spot for Rutgers because they don't have the ability to attack into the Flame Wreath and Dragonfire if they were to want to. They can clear off the Goldshire Footman. I wouldn't be surprised to see them maybe drop down the Doomsayer, or even just like Northshire Cleric heal their Raza, look for something else, and then play the Doomsayer to possibly demand attention from the Flame Wreath hitting that Doomsayer to clear the board.
Yeah, you know, when it comes to Singleton Priest, I definitely defer to your judgment here, Brian. I definitely think the Doomsayer has potential for value here.
Yeah, they're going to go ahead and dig with the Cleric. They still have 5 mana remaining, thanks to the free hero power from Raza. Holy Nova picked up. They're going to go ahead and just use the Darkshire Alchemist to heal themselves, developing their own board.
Yeah.
You know, they don't want to walk into free trade there or free kill from the Flame Wreath Faceless. And frankly, the aggro Shaman deck, not great at necessarily dealing with a bunch of big minions from the opponent, and that free heal each turn from the Raza, in addition to the healing from stuff like the Darkshire Alchemist, can really take the sting out of those hits to the face.
Yeah, Rutgers saying you want to battle on the board, let's battle on the board, and you know, I like it. It's a very proactive approach. You're not necessarily just looking to leverage area of effect spells to remove minions. You are actually saying to the Shaman, can you race me? Mm-hmm. We might be able to race you.
Yeah, and in particular, if Rutgers is able to get to the turn where they can play Medivh without just being insurmountably behind on the board, that can just start generating massive board swings. Because if you're casting Dragonfire Potion, if you're casting Holy Nova, while you have Atiyesh, you are not only eliminating your opponent's threats, but also generating a ton of board presence yourself.
All right, so Speed Bump Wolves being summoned to be Speed Bumps, while Rutgers is basically going to have to deal with them. Poly Montreal can be pushing damage if they choose to, and that's exactly what they're doing.
Well, this is a ooh, that was an incredible draw from Rutgers. The Wild Pyromancer means that Holy Nova clears off everything on the opposing side of the board except for the 7/7, which can be finished off by just the Darkshire Alchemist.
Yeah, that is very timely. And when you're dealing with one-offs, there's so many different tools, and it's so difficult to effectively evaluate whether or not your opponent has them just because of the nature of the deck. So that's very fortuitous for Rutgers, but this is going to be very bad news for Poly Montreal.
Yeah, this not only wipes out their entire board, draws a card because of the Cleric, going to be able to heal the Raza as well, draw another card, and all of a sudden, Poly Montreal's advantage on the board is absolutely gone, and Rutgers is firmly in the driver's seat.
Yeah, we talked about Shaman coming into this, really kind of a shadow of its former self in terms of overall power, and with the exception of Rutgers having that explosive game yesterday with their copy of Shaman, we've just seen it just absolutely struggle this entire tournament.
I'm sure very few people out there are shedding a tear.
Oh, I mean, let's think back to there was a point where Shaman, prior to Tunnel Trog, was having a rough life out there. And people were like, oh, all we want is Shaman to be good, and then Shaman was great.
Yeah, I think it was just Pim Ping Ho, basically, who played Shaman for about a year and a half or so.
Yep, just out there, just hanging out playing Shaman. But yeah, this board now in the favor of Rutgers, and being honest, this version of Shaman in particular is not great about, swinging the board back in its favor outside of maybe Jade Lightning.
Yeah, I mean, it plays very well if it's able to get an advantage on the board, but your deck is full of cards like Firefly. Lava Burst is great when it's killing your opponent, but Lava Burst is not so great when it's, just trying to defend you. And they're overloaded. They played the Feral Spirits last turn. They were relying on those Feral Spirits to defend their Flame Wreath Faces, but instead everything got wiped off the board. And now, the best they can do is another 4-mana 7/7 into a board that can easily destroy it.
Yeah, I said at the beginning of this game, this was basically Helm's Deep, but this is like Helm's Deep if all the orcs had died, and then the Rohirrim were like, oh, let's go outside and kill the rest of them.
That Wild Pyromancer was Gandalf showing up. He was, they
looked to the east.
Yeah.
This really is truly the role-playing desk. All right, well, a game. It's time for Medivh.
Yeah. And as Medivh says, he always wins. And
no cheating required this time.
No, not at all. This hand from Rutgers full of powerful spells, free from Amber plus Atiyesh, a super powerful combo. That Bloodcell Corsair, that is just sad right now in the hand of Poly Montreal.
And yeah, just in case you play that pirate, I got a crawler for you.
Exactly.
I got that.
When your Singleton Priest deck draws every Singleton it needs, frankly, this game, that cleric drew a bunch of extra cards.
Yeah.
So they've had the opportunity to dig for what they needed. They've killed 2 4-mana 7/7s. They have not drawn their single Shadow or Death. They've just ridden the power of their minions, frankly.
Yeah, briefly, we're going to take a step outside a very highly competitive collegiate tournament and onto Brian Kibler's stream as he's like, oh, what kind of crazy fun things can we do with Singleton Priest? Next turn, you could play free from Amber, discover a giant minion, make a giant minion through Atiyesh.
It's not just sweet, it's good.
Ah, wow. That's the rare intersection when those kind of plays come together.
What are you trying to say? It's rare that my decks are good? Come on, man.
I mean, Brian, I'm just saying, I've seen you in that many. Well, no, the Red Bull event.
I literally won a tournament last weekend. Come on, man.
I said
but anyway,
aside from that.
But now, how much damage can they do with this Hydra here? Gonna look for free from Amber. Finds Yashiraj and Deathwing.
I'm saying Yashiraj.
One of the interesting things is Yashiraj sometimes just gets you things out of your deck that you don't want to get. Frankly, here it doesn't really matter. The giant body of either of them is pretty likely to win the game. And, oh, Nose Dormu, they're gonna meme it up.
Okay, this is amazing.
This
the crowd
I can
going
respect.
wild.
They know they are in such a commanding position. They can take the Nozdormu for the memes and win the game.
Well,
I love it.
It's also just really good. You're not giving your any opponents any time to really plan out their plays.
And here they go. Double Jade Lightning does kill Nozdormu, but there's a giant Sandworm still on the board that can clear all of your minions and hit you in the face for 8.
Look at Rutgers. Rutgers is back in it, man. They looked a little bit sullen for just the tiniest moment, but now this is the style they like to play, and they're getting that confidence back, and it looks like they're going to force a final game after this one.
The Dragonfire Potion, no multi-attack for that Worm. 8 to the face. Not a great 6, but you don't need it as Poly Montreal concedes, and we are going to a deciding game in a deciding set for this championship.
Yeah, it's all going to come down to this, and I got to be honest, that was a fun one. And it seems like that Singleton Priest has been the story of this tournament in terms of being exciting to watch.
I mean, that game was great.
Yeah. that was great. I can retire. Just take off your headset
I'm done.
and go. Yep.
You know, but no, I mean, and we saw, we did see some fortunate draws from Rutgers. That Wild Pyromancer was a very key moment that really swung that game. They did have the ability to clear off that board with just the Holy Nova and what they had in the board,
right.
But they would not have generated such a commanding board lead, such a commanding card lead if it were not for that draw of Pyromancer. We see how we got to this point so far. Rutgers now wins that first set, while Poly Montreal took set number 3. So we are in the final game. It will be, in fact, Warlock versus Mage, the handlock from Poly Montreal against the Burn Freeze Mage from Rutgers. This has got to be pretty heavily in the favor of Rutgers, I think.
Yeah, coming into the series, we talked about what an absolute tear Rutgers had been on throughout this entire tournament, this portion of it anyway. Poly Montreal coming in here and kind of feeling a little bit intimidated, just giving the sheer ability and score. But this has been such an even tournament thus far. Poly Montreal has absolutely been putting on a show in their own right.
Yeah, and they've done so with careful, calculated play,
yep.
And solid deck choices. They don't have that many decks in their lineup that really stand out as kind of crazy, but this Warlock deck we're going to see right now is an unusual choice. Most of the tournament did choose to play Zoo. They are instead playing Handlock. And Handlock versus freestyle mage decks, it's been a interesting matchup over the course of Hearthstone's history. But now, without Reno Jackson, without cards like Anti-Healbot, the Warlock deck really needs to take a very proactive approach to try and win the game early by getting down cards like Mountain Giant and just punching away at the mage's face.
Yeah, the inherent ability of Warlock to just tap and draw cards, usually great, but when you're actually harming yourself and taking damage, you don't have the ability to heal back up. Look, playing Jiraxis, do you know what that means to Freeze Mage? That's free win.
Oh, you Alex Strauss yourself? Great.
That's awesome. I was just thinking I would like you to be at 15 health. That's
What
a magic
coincidence.
number. Yeah. And this is I believe for Rutgers, this is the double Pyroblast version.
It is.
So I want to point out there's less counterplay from cards like Dirty Rat.
Right.
Yeah, so this is going to be a tall mountain for Poly Montreal to climb, but I have faith they are certainly equal to the task.
Yeah, and there are ways that this Warlock deck can get out quickly and win. We've seen the Freeze-style mage decks kind of struggle if they just don't find the right cards. They don't find their freeze cards. One of the very key cards for finding your key cards is that Arcanologist we see in Rutgers' opening hand, guaranteeing you the ability to find a secret. But if Poly Montreal is able to get in the board early, get down Mountain Giant, get down Twilight Drake, just punch away with big threats, and there are not the appropriate freeze Doomsayer turns available to Rutgers, they can win with those big hits.
I want to point out one card in particular there Poly Montreal had in the opening hand. They obviously mulliganed. It's correct to do so. At least the Trailblazer can add an element of uncertainty to this matchup because you can potentially get spells like Binding Heal. You can get other spells that allow you to heal and out-survive the damage, but it's obviously highly unlikely and will require the game, frankly, to go on for a long time.
Yeah, the version of Handlock that Poly Montreal is playing is a very, very defensively oriented one, tuned, it looks, against minion-based decks. They have double Mistress of Mixtures. They have double Doomsayer. They have double Faceless Shambler, double Defender of Argus. Lots of ways to take advantage of those big minions like Humongous Razor Leaf that we see in their opening hand.
Yeah, Humongous Razor Leaf, very powerful in its own right, has found a home in this version of Handlock as well as Purify Priest, other silence-oriented decks, but doesn't stop direct damage, does not stop Pyroblast, Fireball, Frostbolt, so it's unfortunately not that powerful at all.
Yeah, in order for your Humongous Razor Leaf to have really any impact in this game, there's a single copy of Spellbreaker available to Poly Montreal. There's also those two Faceless Shamblers, which they can use in combination with Humongous Razor Leaf to make a big taunt minion, but this isn't a matchup where it's about minion damage that much. It's about protecting yourself. Yes, you don't want to take a lot of just hits incrementally from Arcanologist or Loot Hoarder or Medivh's Valet, but those early hits are what kind of add up, and then the late game burn finishes you off.
Yeah, just a reminder, looking at the score on the left hand of the screen, we see 1-1 that is in this final deciding set. So a reminder, guys, at home and in the audience, whoever wins this game wins the championship. They win the largest share of $160,000 in scholarship prize pooling. So a lot on the line and coming down to this final climactic game.
Yeah, this is a big moment for both of these teams. The Rutgers squad had said, the night before the event, when Noblord, in fact, was not yet here. He was flying in late because he had a test he could not miss. They wanted to do this for him. They felt like Noblord was such a strong player. He had, done so well over the course of the previous year, made it to the last call tournament, but hadn't really had a breakout win in a major event. And this would mean an incredible amount to them. On the other side, you have Poly Montreal, who are relative unknowns in the competitive scene, but this breakout performance could put them on the map alongside fellow French-Canadian players Doc Pone and Cydonia, who had tremendous success over the past year.
Yeah, Cydonia actually reached out to them on social media to wish them well, say he was very proud of them. That French-Canadian Hearthstone scene, pretty tightly knit overall, but Rutgers coming in here with the expectation that they're going to win. Poly Montreal came into this kind of really just surprised they made it this far with no real expectations, nervous because of the competitive expertise of Noblord and Rutgers. So two very different teams coming up to this final moment, but pretty evenly matched as we've seen throughout this series.
But we are seeing kind of both these teams taking a very similar approach in this final game of this tournament. We'd seen kind of joking around from Rutgers, a very playful attitude, but they're taking their time discussing every possible option every single turn of this game so far.
Yeah, and no matter what stage you're at, whether it's a collegiate championship, a Hearthstone seasonal championship, once you get to this final stage and then this final decisive game, the last of the games, it's absolutely just adrenaline.
Yeah, it's a very, very different feeling than sitting on your couch at home playing Hearthstone on your tablet, or sitting in the tavern down here. It's a lot of fun to play Hearthstone, but sometimes it can be a little bit stressful too.
I was going to say, it's probably much less stressful if you're in the audience right now playing Hearthstone, especially with those dual developers.
I know, it's Dean's stressful to play against. He's scary, man.
Yeah, he's a very good Hearthstone player. We see here, though, both teams just kind of taking their time, making sure that they are making the best plays overall. And these are two decks which, unless the Handlock kind of gets that start you were talking about earlier with the Twilight Drakes, with the Mountain Giants, things tend to go a little bit slower, and that is the problem for the Handlock.
There is a Twilight Drake in the hand for Poly Montreal. They could choose to coin that at next turn, get a big minion down that can potentially protect them from the smaller minions from Rutgers. But yeah, we are seeing, the teams really taking advantage of the fact this is a team event. Players all discussing their options with their teammates and going through, seeing if there's anything one of them missed.
Yeah, Poly Montreal definitely has that very much consensus approach. Every voice is equal. No mouses are touched until, a decision is come to by the whole team. Whereas, as we discussed a little bit ago, Rutgers pretty much has Noblord opining his thoughts on the matter, and then the other guys kind of sign off on it. We do see, as you said, that coin coming out with the Twilight Drake. Do you think there was any merit to potentially getting that Razor Leaf established, putting down the Twilight Drake the turn after, and then putting up the walls?
I think you need to be proactive here. I think that you're not just trying to defend yourself from your opposing minions. You need to put a clock on the mage, because as the game goes long, there's a very limited amount of healing in the Warlock deck. There's just 2 copies of Earthen Ring Farseer, 2 copies of Siphon Soul, and if you consider Jirax's healing, it's healing. But you're playing against a deck that's looking to put you to 15, probably not going to rely on that to keep you alive.
I was going to say, until I've seen 2 Pyroblasts, 2 Primordial Glyphs, 2 Frostbolts, and 2 Fireballs, Jiraxis is not healing.
Yeah, no, it's a rare moment when you're like, you know what, I want to go up to 15, and that's probably going to keep me alive against Freeze Mage. I mean, it can certainly happen.
Sure.
There are times when you're going to fire off some damage, put your opponent down to, say, 10 life to set them up for a Pyroblast next turn. Jiraxis can get you out of range of that. But it is definitely a scary proposition to play that card in this matchup.
And this is why I so much enjoy the double Pyroblast version of Freeze Mage. If there's an Antonidas in the deck, Poly Montreal could say, okay, let's try to find a way to thin out the deck of some of the smaller minions, see if we can't pull out that Antonidas and immediately deal with it. There goes a certain number of damage, but you just know, look, there are 2 10-mana spells that do 10 damage apiece, along with the Fireballs, along with the Frostbolt, so that damage is eventually coming as the mage draws through its deck.
And speaking of damage, Rutgers chose to use theirs that turn to eliminate the Twilight Drake. They don't want to allow Poly Montreal to establish a board and get damage on them. It also, importantly, removes a minion going into a 4-mana turn from Montreal, which would allow them to get down a Faceless Shambler. Right now, if there were a Shambler in Poly Montreal's hand, it would kind of be stranded at this point. The draw that Poly Montreal had this turn, the Mistress of Mixtures, we didn't really count that in the healing they have available. It is a potential heal in a situation like this where only they've taken damage, they're just looking to life tap. And now they're going to go ahead and play a Doomsayer, looking to kind of open up the board for themselves on the following turn.
Yeah, having 2 copies of Mistress of Mixtures can make a difference, although, again, that's only a total of 8 healing overall if you get both of them. And again, you're tapping, and that tap damage is extremely relevant. You're not going to just have the ability to boost yourself back up to full health like the days of old.
And one of the problems with Mistress of Mixtures and counting it as healing is that it's only healing if you get to play it and it dies. Yeah. If your opponent is pointing burn at your face, it's not like you can just play it and...
Mistress of Mixtures, get in the way!
Yeah, kill this before you kill me, come on.
Yeah, it does not have the ability to block spells,
yeah,
sadly.
even taunting it up with a Defender of Argus or Sunfear Protector, not going to stop a Pyroblast.
Yeah. There's so much about this matchup that realistically favors the mage, just not trying to sugarcoat it. In fact, all the things this handlock deck is kind of meant to do and meant to be good at, a lot of it is just irrelevant against the mage.
Yeah, we see the double Sunfear Protector, the humongous Razor Leaf, the Shadow Flame in the hand here. These are all cards that are meant to give you the ability to stall out the board, protect yourself from big minions coming from the opponent. You're not really looking to attack your opponent when you're playing this mage deck. You're primarily looking to protect yourself and just burn them out.
Yeah, name of the game is definitely priority 1, staying alive, priority 2, digging through the deck to find the burn, and then priority 3 is just training it all together. And look, if your hero's damaging itself, then that just makes it all the easier. And
now the Doomsayer clears the board for Poly Montreal, and they have the opportunity to get the initiative here, but their initiative is a 4/8 that cannot attack. They did pick up a Faceless Shambler, so that can potentially represent a threat coming out next turn, but that is only so threatening when this game is already going very late, which favors the mage deck looking to put together a bunch of burn.
Yeah, we're just getting Doomsayer, Loot Hoarder, Ping, and the pings can be a big deal. Getting in that 1 guaranteed damage per turn used to be really relevant in terms of influencing how the Reno Jackson was played, but now it's just damage that sticks.
It just adds up. Yeah, there's no Reno Jackson to heal the Warlock back to full, so every point there is a point that you don't have to do with burn spells, and the Warlock needs to heal back up, and there's only so much healing to do that.
Yeah, I'm trying to see here. The Siphon Soul could be used to cleanly answer the Doomsayer, but that... I'm trying to think, does that actually feel that bad? What else are you looking to even Siphon Soul, and do you really care about keeping the Humongous Razor Leaf to activate the Faceless Shambler?
It's a weird spot because if you do Siphon Soul, you kill the Doomsayer and you protect your Razor Leaf. You do just leave this Loot Hoarder into play, though. It's going to attack you in the face, so you're taking a little bit of damage. You don't have that many good targets for Siphon Soul anyway, and frankly, you don't have much use for the rest of your mana this turn if you're not killing Doomsayer, so I expect we will see it, but it's not like this is a great board swing. You're super happy to Siphon Soul this Doomsayer.
Yeah, you're protecting a minion that can attack so that a later turn you can use the Faceless Shambler, which can then attack, but again, this is taking time,
right,
and it's time you do not have.
Yeah, primarily the goal from Rutgers of playing that Doomsayer was just to forestall the development of Montreal in that turn. They saw the 4-8 plant come down. They're like, okay, we want to stop you from playing Faceless. We want to stop you from being able to be the aggressor. And we look at this game, Rutgers is at 30. They have not taken any damage so far, and frankly, it is Poly Montreal who kind of has to be the aggressor here, because if the game goes long enough, the Mage deck is just going to find all the burn it needs to just throw at the face of the Warlock.
All right, so looking at the hand of Rutgers, we see a few different options in terms of freeze and drawing cards, but I mean, it's basically just Thalanos, Arcane Intellect. How many cards are actually in the hand of Rutgers? I believe it's 8.
Looks like it's actually 9. Oh, for Rutgers, rather. I was looking at Poly Montreal. Yeah, they have 8 cards right now for Rutgers.
So you could Arcane Intellect and not worrying about, well, because of the Loot Hoarder on the board, actually you can't.
Well, sort of. You could, I mean, they
Barrier first.
Yeah, they could just play Barrier.
I mean, this is all Rutgers has to do is just keep digging. Like, how do you play the Arcane Intellect? Yeah, why would you hit the Razor Leaf yet?
Well,
the Shambler.
Hitting the Razor Leaf means that Shambler doesn't have additional health if they are to taunt it up. If you care about getting more minion damage in, and you want to sort of neutralize the threat of a potential Shambler, then getting the damage on the Razor Leaf can make sense.
Nah, I'm just focused on, like, let's say that Valet, just get them. Once you hit 0 health, that's it, and you're not going back up by large increments. I know you got Earthen Ring Farseer, Siphon Souls, Mistress of Mixtures, but I got bigger spells.
Also, the Valet says you are on fire, not your plant is on fire, so role-playing.
Role-play accordingly, please.
Yeah, exactly. Come on. Have some respect for the vocal emote.
All right, Mortal Coil coming out, which is nice because they get to draw a card and not deal 2 damage to themselves, but...
Ooh, and this Mountain Giant is a nice draw here because it gives them a significant threat, but it may just be too little too late here because, yes, it's big, and it is a significant potential clock, but the clock is really on Montreal. They're already down to just 16 life, and Rutgers has had the ability to assemble a lot of cards. They don't have all of their burn, though. There's no Pyroblast here.
I was going to say, the hand is actually conspicuously devoid of burn, and that is what they need to win, so maybe that Mountain Giant can actually make a difference, but it feels like if the hand's not full of burn, what's it full of?
Well, it's full of freezes.
Yeah.
And those freezes are going to make it very difficult for the Mountain Giant to really ever connect the face. I mean, this turn from Rutgers could very easily just be Arcane Intellect, hit you in the face with Valet, or ping, Frost Nova you, leaves you with the ability to just continue chaining Blizzards until you're just going to have potentially that Pyroblast to end the game.
Yeah, going to need that Mountain Giant to slow down.
Yes.
Alex Straza, probably great in other matchups. In fact, very great. But I don't think you're going to be Alex Straza-ing your opponent from 16 to 15.
Not really terribly relevant at this stage.
All right, Ice Block, Valet to the face.
We may just see them ping, I think, because right now they have a barrier up, and considering they decided not to use the Nova, which makes sense because they're nowhere near needing to actually protect themselves from this giant, they can just afford to use the ping just every turn, get an incremental damage in, just gets them closer and closer to the point that they can just throw that burn at the face.
Yeah, really no need to rush the Valet, as you said. Still feels cool to use.
Yeah, he, like we said, has a sweet vocal emote. He's got like a little monkey in his picture. Or rather, he is the little monkey with a little hat.
Yesterday we're rating dragons. Today we're rating cards. 12 out of 10. Cool monkey. All right, Faceless Shambler comes down. That is going to be another 8/8. So the board pressure is beginning to pile up, but we look in the hand of Rutgers and see 3 freezes.
Yeah, these look like a lot of threatening minions, but they're only so threatening when they can never really get a chance to attack.
I like this from Poly Montreal. They're like, all right, we're just going. Throw things on the board.
Yeah.
You know what? If they manage to clear it, good on them. They got it. Although they can Shadow Flame anything to deal with the Doomsayer anyway.
It's true. Well, there is a Pyroblast picked up by the Rutgers squad. And they don't have the damage to set their opponents to 10 this turn. There's just the Valet and a possible ping. We may see them dig with the Primordial Glyph.
Yeah, Primordial Glyph in this matchup, well, not this matchup particularly, but with this deck, is usually just used to find more burn. Although, if you're in a situation where you need extra health in the form of an Ice Block, you need board freeze, usually Primordial Glyph can give you a hand. It's rare to just completely whiff out with Primordial Glyph.
And even if they did completely whiff on Primordial Glyph, frankly, they have enough resources that they don't really need it. They have the ability to freeze the board 3 times in the next few turns. And they find, well, that looks like another Ice Block if they were to need additional time. We see a Molten Reflection, not really terribly useful. Mirror Image to prevent some damage. I would expect to see potentially just take the Ice Block. If they really need to extend the length of the game for more burn, yeah, we see the Ice Block picked up. The fact that that costs 1 as well is pretty relevant because they can squeeze that in alongside, even like an Alexstrasza. If they somehow get pressured down, they're super low, they can, play Ice Block and Alexstrasza in the same turn.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you have so much freeze, you have so much ability to survive. You're going to get to the end of your deck, you're going to draw that burn, and you're just going to end the game against the Warlock. So I definitely don't mind the Ice Block, nor do I realistically think of it as a whiff. You're just giving yourself more time.
Yeah, and this has been a game where Rutgers has, frankly, been firmly in the driver's seat the entire time. Montreal had a bit of a reactive hand in the early turns, wasn't able to put on a lot of pressure. Frankly, their deck is a bit of a reactive deck, so not terribly surprising that was the case. But now, they're starting to draw their big threats. There's Mountain Giant number 2. But again, all those freezes available to Rutgers is going to make it very difficult for these to ever meaningfully connect.
Yeah, I'd say Rutgers is firmly in the driver's seat, and Poly Montreal isn't even allowed to get in the car. It's getting pretty grim.
Their license has been revoked.
I was gonna say they're having to bike places.
Every turn, it's like suspended.
Yep.
And they got to go to the DMV to get it back. And
try again next turn.
I imagine the Canadian DMV is probably a little bit nicer though.
I was actually doing some research on Canada for the Hearthstone Global Games. It might just be the friendliest place in the world. I would imagine they have a friendly DMV.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably more like the one from like Zootopia. It's just manned by sloths.
Oh, that sounds terrible, too, for a different reason. But seeing the board state here, you think, okay, well, there's a lot of pressure coming out from Poly Montreal. But, again, just want to make the point, Rutgers' hand is pretty much, I don't want to deal with this, just waiting to get to my burn.
And even though there is just such a huge board, there's the possibility of just Blizzard this turn. You could even see Blizzard plus barrier or Blizzard plus a ping or something.
Ping.
And then next turn there's a possibility of just Flame Strike. And these are all these giants. If they ping this, the 8/6 giant, just a Blood Mage plus Flame Strike next turn kills everything. All of these gigantic minions, only one has ever gotten a chance to attack. It just soaked up an Ice Barrier. And now, next turn, they can all just be dead without ever having a chance to do any actual damage to Rutgers.
I appreciate that the ping went to a minion, but that valet damage, okay, that's 3 damage. We know where that's going.
We know.
Yeah.
You.
Right to the face.
I mean, here, Poly Montreal does have a Defender of Argus. So Defender of Argus can pump up the pinged giant as well as the giant next to it, which theoretically can keep the board, or at least one minion alive against the Blood Mage plus Flame Strike, but there's that valet in play. So even if they were to pump those up, it would not protect them. They're okay. Shadow Flame, they recognize that threat. They're going to go ahead and use the Defender of Argus to try and protect their board a little bit. And the Blood Mage plus Flame Strike is available, which can clear off everything but one giant.
Yeah, and we've been talking about how Rutgers is firmly in command of the game, but, shout out to Poly Montreal. They are doing everything they can. They are making big boards. They're just basically at the mercy of what Rutgers has in hand. And, again, we talked about if Rutgers isn't burning you out, it's probably because their hand is full of card draw or things that affect the board. So It's just a really unfortunate situation for Poly Montreal here.
Yeah, and this Blood Mage plus Flame Strike, the giant stands alone with just 1 health.
All of his friends are dead. Ooh, it's like a George Martin book in here.
Yeah, or that dinosaur cartoon.
Yeah.
It's more appropriate for Goro, I think. But.
Yeah, okay, we'll go with that one. I like that one.
But now, first blood may in fact finally be drawn by Poly Montreal, getting 9 damage in with this giant.
Look at Abyssal Enforcer, too. That's usually
it's like,
a powerful card in its own right, but it's like, it does 3 damage. Maybe I don't want to play it.
Yeah.
Or you play it and then Jiraxis yourself back up.
Ooh.
Yeah, a little fancy.
Yeah, this is just such a rough spot for Poly Montreal. They have been navigating this very carefully. Recognized the threat of the Flame Strike last turn, played around it by Shadow Flaming away one of their minions to kill just a single Valet. But even then, it is so hard to fight through all of this freeze from Rutgers.
Yeah, now on the plus side, they've seen a Flame Strike, they've seen 2 Blizzards, and you know Poly Montreal is just sitting there in their head counting through the cards they've seen in order to give themselves the best possible percentage chance to make a play that has any kind of impact on this board.
And they life tap, always scary at this stage because just not working with that much health.
Yeah, you better believe that Mountain Giant is not trading into Thalnos. That is going to get damage in where they can.
And they're taunting up. Ooh, the Mistress of Mixture is gonna be protected.
Yep. Yeah, it's really unfortunate. Obviously, by buffing up the Mountain Giant, they were trying to survive the myriad of board clear possibilities, but unfortunately, it does expose it to the Blood Mage Thalnos, who's going to walk over and kick it in the shin, and that's unfortunately the end of the last of the Giants.
Wah, wah.
Yeah, I think I saw that movie. It's pretty good.
What to do?
And yeah, what to do indeed for Rutgers here. They, like you said, can just trade into the Giant with the Blood Mage, find themselves another card. I mean, they could fire off a Fireball face first. If they use Fireball to the opposing face, then trade, they are in a position where just that Pyroblast wins the game next turn.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of their mana to work with.
Choosing to just take it slow instead of hearing, okay,
There's
this is
Pyroblast number 2.
Now all they have to do is aim the Pyroblast face.
And they have an ice block up. There is not enough healing to get Poly Montreal out of this.
There's one more Earthen Ring Farseer, I believe. There's one more Siphon Soul.
There is Jiraxis. They're going to Jiraxis, but there's still Pyroblast plus Fireball remaining in the hand for Rutgers here.
Yeah, and basically now, what could happen here is Earthen Ring Farseer could come out, the second copy of Siphon Soul, but you're healing in increments that realistically don't actually matter compared to what remains in the deck of Rutgers.
Yeah, and there's no realistic way for Poly Montreal to actually kill this board effectively, or rather to deal this damage to get through even the ice block that's already in play and keep themselves alive. The ping sets them down to 8. So Earthen Ring Farseer could keep them alive through a Pyroblast next turn. That's a Siphon Soul.
Siphon Soul, your own humongous,
yeah. No, they can Siphon Soul their own Mistress of Mixtures.
Oh, true, that adds
7
even
life.
more healing. So, okay. They've already seen one Fireball.
Right.
So there's 2 Frost Bolts I want to think in here that we haven't seen.
Yeah, and this Siphon Soul, it will be a almost full heal. Oh, no, it will be an absolutely full heal, exactly.
Credit to Poly Montreal. They're doing everything in their power to cling to life. And, Jiraxis, if it doesn't get dealt with and the Frost Bolts are not drawn, there is a chance this could get interesting.
Yeah. And there's still, there's not a ton of damage left in the deck for Rutgers here. They don't need much, though. They already have a Pyroblast waiting. And they have a lot of freezes, too. And that Archaeologist, I think, gets a 3rd ice block. Because that one in their hand that's 1 cost was created by the Primordial Glyph.
Would actually love to see how many cards are left in the deck. I don't know that it's going to be relevant, but it's worth knowing. Because obviously, even with that many ice blocks, fatigue damage could be a thing. And Earthen Ring Farseer could bring I'm trying to think if it even matters. Because if they get both Frost Bolts, I believe that's just game.
Yes.
Like, even Earthen Ring Farseer doesn't correct the health deficiency.
Spellbreaker, that can silence the plant, can get a little bit more damage in, so increase the clock marginally. That actually will be 10, 11, 12. Not quite enough to actually break the block this turn.
But at least they're putting on the pressure.
With the Defender of Argus, is it? It's 10, 15, 16. No, it's still not quite enough.
Yeah, but they are putting on the pressure. Yeah. They understand that there is a chance. The last of that burn is at the bottom of the deck.
And it actually crucially does mean that just the Jiraxis Fist can actually break Ice Block next turn. So Frost Nova will not end up actually preserving Ice Block for a turn. the ice block picked up means Archaeologist will not draw anything.
Oh, ping, though, is extremely important.
Yeah, it is. It is.
That's I completely forgot about that. That's just 1 guaranteed damage per turn.
But,
so even if Earthen Ring Farseer had been able to bring it back just a little bit, that's still 1 damage coming in per turn. And
we do see the extra ice blocks, 2 more ice blocks in the hand. Picking up that 1 ice block this turn, rather than getting it through Archaeologist, does mean that effectively this is a missed draw for Rutgers. So, we were kind of talking about this game as almost a foregone conclusion, but there's, I don't know exactly the composition remaining from Rutgers' deck, but if they need to find burn basically in a couple of turns to fight through these ice blocks. So they still a massive favor. They more or less have to miss on burn for 4 turns. I don't know if that's even possible with the composition of their deck that's remaining.
Right, you're facing the hero power. You're facing the fact that if ice block comes off the top next turn, you're done. I mean, it's definitely gotten more interesting, but I don't necessarily want to sell everyone the world where Poly Montreal is likely to turn this one around.
Right, and there's the even an extra draw that we're going to see from this Loot Hoarder right here. There's the Frostbolt, and yeah. The fight from Montreal was fierce, but they have no way to heal, and that Frostbolt from Rutgers is going to end the game.
Yeah, Rutgers about to throw up the celebratory fist, I believe, here is they have managed to ice out this series where at point they found themselves behind again.
Yeah, the first time they were behind in the entire tournament, but they did not stay behind, and it will be Rutgers who win the game and the match, and they are the 2017 Hearthstone Collegiate Champions.
Yeah, we see they're getting claps from Poly Montreal. That was a well-played series, came down to the wire. Have to think Poly Montreal's best chance was with that aggressive Shaman, which could have done something, but playing against that Singleton Priest, piloted too well by Rutgers, and this is going to be well won. Finally, a major championship win for Noblord, and his friends supporting him the whole way.
Yeah, we heard his teammates saying before the tournament they hoped they could win it for Noblord. They felt like he had been such a key component of their success all season that he deserved the victory, and the victory is theirs.
Yeah, congratulations to Rutgers, and well played by Poly Montreal. We see the crowd there hanging out, watching, waving. Hello to everyone in the esports arena in Santa Ana. It has been an incredible weekend for collegiate Hearthstone esports.
Yeah, just an incredible weekend for, kind of just hanging out and gaming too.
Yeah.
We had a great crowd the entire time here. Everyone seems to be having a blast, and certainly Rutgers, they had a blast this weekend.
Yeah, again, it's the scholarship prize winnings. That's a huge factor. I certainly know as someone, currently feeling the burn of scholarship not there. But again, a major championship win for them. That is something that, years from now could be the starting point into your competitive foray.
It doesn't even have to be years from now. It could be tomorrow.
I guess you could do it tomorrow. You probably want to take the day off. You just want a big tournament.
You can relax a little bit.
But very well played by Rutgers, and coming into this, absolutely proving just how good they are.
Yeah, we take a look at the final score here. It was first set was picked up by Rutgers. Second set was, in fact, our final set, which we saw the Mage defeating the Warlock in the end. But Poly Montreal did manage to pick up that set and keep Rutgers sweating the entire time, all the way down to the final game.
Yeah, up until this stage, Rutgers, not to necessarily discredit the teams that came before Poly Montreal, Rutgers had not really been made to sweat. In this one, we saw the mannerism suddenly shifting as things tensed up. But let's go ahead and take a look at the bracket, see how we got here. Again, day one, Shawnee State defeated UC Berkeley, went on to the semifinals. Poly Montreal took out North Carolina. UT San Antonio took out Colorado State. And UC Riverside would ultimately fall to Rutgers. And from there, we saw all the semifinals today leading up to the grand finals of Poly Montreal versus Rutgers, with Rutgers emerging victorious, deservedly so.
Yeah, we saw Rutgers playing so well throughout the entire weekend. We saw some really creative lines of play that won them games that, frankly, I think a lot of their teams would not have won. And, very much deserving of this championship.
Yeah, when we talked to other teams, they themselves were actually very impressed by how Rutgers navigated a lot of these matchups. And that's really the mark of the true elite in Hearthstone, is the ability to see in obvious plays and situations and read the lines and turn defeated situations into victory.
Yeah, and it really paid off. We saw a lot of very complicated situations, not necessarily the most complicated in that last game. That was pretty straightforward, point the burn at your face. But ultimately, whatever it takes to get the victory.
Yeah, so congratulations once again to Rutgers. Hope to see Poly Montreal back in it, along with these other teams we saw this weekend. Brian, it has been a pleasure casting with you. Any final thoughts on this weekend?
Just absolutely great experience. The entire weekend was amazing to have so many people coming out here to the esports arena, to the tavern. And if you ever have an opportunity to come out to an event like this, you definitely should not miss it.
All right, so couldn't say it any better myself. We're going to head on over to Frodan, who is standing by with the winners. It's Rutgers.
We have ourselves a champion. It's Rutgers University from the East region. And of course, it is captained by Noblord. Over the course of many years, you've been competing in Hearthstone, and this season you had to beat out over 800 teams to get to this point. You've been looking for a championship. You finally have it. What does it mean to you?
It just means amazing. It just feels amazing. Like, all the hard work and research is finally paying off. We felt really like within the series, the game 5, we were really scared because we weren't sure if we were going to win, because we had to win 2 games in a row in one of our sets, and then we lost like the first game in the first set. So we're like, oh, we have to hit this Priest against not Handlock, because Priest versus Handlock is just not a good matchup. And once we hit that, we're like, all right, so we got that. We just have to play as well as we can, and we eventually got there. We made plays that were good enough to get the wins. So I'm pretty happy about that.
Absolute meticulous play has led to the victory, and of course, I think the morale was boosted, largely because Orpheus was keeping it up, and I think you've been saying that you want to say a lot of things to the people back at home.
I just want to thank everyone back at Rutgers that was supporting us, my girlfriend, the brothers Pi Delta Psi. It was like really good coming out here. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
All right, here to present the trophy, I'd like to have Hamilton Chu, the executive producer of Blizzard Entertainment and Team 5 of Hearthstone. Congratulate you guys on a journey and accomplish well done.
Thanks, Dan. Wow, that was amazing. What a match. This has been an amazing tournament. The Hearthstone Collegiate Championship started at the beginning of the year, over 800 teams, but now only one is standing up here. Congratulations, Rutgers. That was a great match. Thanks. Sorry. Thanks, Dan. Yeah. How about that Nozdormu, huh? Dang! You never know what's hiding in the amber. All right, I'm supposed to actually give you your trophies now. So congratulations. Let's hear it for Noblord, Lord of all knobs. And Orpheus. And Ludicolo. Congratulations, guys. Amazing performance.
Thank you, everybody who showed up today to the fireside. A big shout out to all the fans and all the people that participated. We had over 800 schools, $160,000 on the line, and finally one champion. If you guys are interested in competing, make sure to check out Tespa.org for future upcoming seasons. Until then, from Frodan, Admirable, Brian Kilberg, Cora, JV, Neptune, and everyone else here in Santa Ana, California, thanks for watching, and we'll see you for another season next time here in the Hearthstone Collegiate Championships.